Cinphomaniac is full of spoilers. If the movie's there in the title, we're probably gonna say everything that happens in it. So don't fucking listen if you don't want to know.
Hold it right there.
It's me, Johnny.
I knew it was you. I could smell you getting off the elevator. You was here last night, too, wasn't you?
I was singing at the Blue Monkey last night.
She was not. She was smooching with your brother.
You was here. And you was smooching with my brother.
That's a dirty, rotten lie, Johnny.
Don't give me that. You've been smooching with everybody. Snuffy, Al, Leo, Little Mo with the gimpy leg, Cheeks, Boney Bob, Cliff. I could go on forever, baby.
You got me all wrong.
All right. I believe you. But my Tommy gun don't.
Johnny, you're the only duck in my pond.
Get down on your knees and tell me you love me.
Baby, I'm over the moon for you.
You gotta do better than that.
If my love was an ocean, Lindy'd have to take 2 airplanes to get across it.
Maybe I'm off my hinges, but I believe you. That's why I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna give you to the count of 3 to get your lousy, lying, low-down, 4-flushing carcass out my door.
She's rat bait.
1, 2. 3. Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. And a Happy New Year.
To me, the great hope is just people who normally wouldn't make movies are going to be making them. And, suddenly one day some little fat girl in Ohio is going to be the new Mozart, and make a beautiful film with her little father's camera. To me, the great hope is girl in Ohio is going to be the new Mozart. To me, the great hope is people who normally wouldn't make movies are going to be making them. To me, the great hope is Ohio is going to be the new Mozart. To me, the great hope is people who normally wouldn't make movies are going to be making. To me, the great hope is one day some little fat girl in Ohio is going to just be Mozart. Normally wouldn't make them, but Ohio is making them in Mozart. Just people who normally wouldn't make them Mozart and be making them. To me, the great hope girl in Ohio is going to make a Mozart beautiful film with her little father's camera recorder, and for once the so-called professionalism about movie Mozart destroyed forever, and it'll really become an art form. That's my opinion.
Today, we are here to talk about a movie that was quite the blockbuster in its time, and actually even for a long, long time afterwards, was quite the record holder. And that movie is Home Alone.
Home Alone.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Like, this is
Mommy and Daddy forgot me at
this
the house. I gotta defend my house. I'm home alone.
Oh my God, yes. The Home Alone Saturday morning cartoon, which actually I'm shocked that wasn't a thing.
Why is that not a thing?
I mean, it felt like every movie of that era had some weird cartoon spinoff, so it's really weird that it doesn't actually. But I don't know. That's an interesting what if scenario. And in some other universe, like we might see in the Spider-Man movie, there might be that Home Alone cartoon. That would make a lot of sense.
Home?
Long way from Home Alone. Don't even get me started, actually, because now I just realized the Home Alone Spider-Man Away from Home crossover crossover franchise that hasn't happened yet, but totally can, because Home Alone is was a Fox movie, but that means Disney owns it now, and they it's on Disney Plus. That's how you watch them. And obviously they could do, since Spider-Man already have the collaboration with Sony over Spider-Man, they could do Home Alone cross Spider-Man, or they could just do an animated Home Alone Spider-Man where they don't even need Sony's involvement, really. A little bit. I think Sony has some involvement in.
What if he just pops in and saves the day for a second and then just says, everybody gets one, and then he's out?
I don't know. I don't even want to, like, there's a very specific villain that I think would be perfect, but I don't even want to say it just in case, like, it's like people think it's like well, no, not him though. He is in the new movie, but I was going to say, I don't want people to think it's like a spoiler for that movie. So I'll just, even if by the time people hear this, they've already seen it. I don't know. I don't know. Everything's weird. But the point I'm making is that this episode followed by the episode we're going to do next week that's going to drop on Christmas, and obviously the last episode of the year, our end of year. They're all kind of, well, really just these specific two, this and next week. These are our Christmas episodes, you know, and we're doing it right. We're doing it right.
Yeah,
we're doing it right.
Definitely.
Because,
the season.
'Tis the season. I mean, Home Alone is the Christmas movie. We're going to talk about why. But the movie came out November 16th, 1990, written by John Hughes, directed by Chris Columbus. And
not that Chris Columbus,
that Chris Columbus, the one who also directed the first two Harry Potter movies. And we're not going to talk about Harry Potter. I have a Harry Potter gag order on this podcast until further notice. I mean, there's a reason I don't talk about it, but you know, that said, they did drop a trailer for their latest spinoff movie, which I did watch because I can't not be curious about it. But yeah. But anyway, less said about it, the better. The point is, Chris Columbus, before he made those movies, he directed Home Alone, which obviously had a big reason to why he was entrusted with that franchise when he was. And as I alluded to, it was a huge success, big box office smash hit right out the gate, made nearly $500 million worldwide, like $476.7 million. Crazy.
Was the record after Titanic for him?
That was the record. That was the record for the highest grossing comedy film of all time until The Hangover Part 2. But it was one of the highest grossing movies, period. I just don't know where in the ranking it is. That's not like Star Wars level or anything like that. But shit, man, it's like more than almost any other movie that's not like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, look, like that's the gross that I don't want to make comparisons too much because there's all sorts of issues with the then versus now and inflation and all these different things. But so it was obviously the success of it made MaCaulay Culkin, who is of course Kevin, the star of the film, though maybe not the explicit protagonist entirely or the only protagonist. I don't want to talk about all that, but Culkin, you know, he became this massive star. I mean, I remember growing up, like that dude's was everywhere. It was someone people talked about constantly. MaCaulay Culkin this, MaCaulay Culkin this, MaCaulay Culkin this. I even remember my parents, like, they never said this to me explicitly, but I always felt like sometimes they'd be like, you should be like MaCaulay Culkin. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was and we're going to talk about this in general because there's quite a few aspects of this movie that I would say are like this. But like, you know, well before the internet and our modern version of the internet with its specific kind of meme culture, like this film had like true like meme kind of visibility even before the internet, right? Like, and that was evident because like the amount of marketing and advertising, cross-promoting products and different things and just like specific cultural references that you would see a lot, like referenced Home Alone, referenced MaCaulay Culkin, referenced those specific facial expressions, those specific quotes, etc. So that was already all kind of there. And it's been amazing to kind of watch it not only endure, but like translate into those modern sort of ways of codifying itself. Now, what's interesting too is, of course, the film, because it was so successful, gets a sequel, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, which is not the focus of this episode, but we are going to talk about it a little bit just because, like, to some degree in my mind, like I just rewatched the first movie obviously last night, but like some degree in my mind, they're borderline interchangeable. Like I remember certain things and then I'm like, wait, that's Home Alone 2, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's pretty hard not because
totally
like
mixed up.
Because I don't know.
But also it's because he's like such a similar age. So like he looks the same in one.
No, he looks a little bit older. If you compare they made a big point about trying to get this movie made so they didn't look radically older. But
yeah, that's probably why I personally get them mixed up because he looks the same in both movies, like a year apart, something like that.
Well, you know, it's interesting, and for other reasons, just because of like my own Asian relationship to this stuff, like. When I think of MaCaulay Culkin, I tend to think of Home Alone 2 MaCaulay Culkin. And then like when I ever watched the first movie, it was always like a little bit of like oh yeah, he's like much smaller here.
He's like a
you know, yeah. So I mean, I don't like in a weird way. Like I'm pretty certain I saw Home Alone 1 before I saw Home Alone 2, but like I wouldn't be surprised if like you could have fooled me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because when I was some of my earliest memories are of like some of like the Home Alone 2 mass marketing, and which tells you that Home Alone 2's marketing, like the product tie-in stuff, was coming well after the movie had even come out. You know what I mean? Like that's how ingrained in it was. Like we'll talk a little bit about it later, but like the only Home Alone movie I actually remember the lead up to actually being released was Home Alone 3. And I was like already like,
too old. Yeah. We're over it. Well, there was that other kid too. I thought he was cute. I thought those movies were cute. Obviously they don't hold a candle to original.
I haven't rewatched them, so it's not as if, and I never saw Home Alone 4 and 5. We're going to talk about Home Alone 6.
3, 4, and I think I saw 5, but maybe not 6. And then I just saw the recent Home Sweet.
Yeah, that's 6. That's 6. I just called 6. It 6.
Oh, okay.
So
so it's 5. Yeah. I haven't seen. I've seen 3 and 4, but I skipped 5 and I've seen 6.
I don't think anyone's seen 5 unless they were like
I can't remember
who just like
head
was attached to ABC Family randomly in like the mid 2000s, because it was not like a big deal. It was like a shitty TV movie.
That's probably I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it was called The Holiday Heist. Home Alone: The Holiday Heist. Home Alone 4 is actually called Home Alone 4, but Home Alone 5 is The Holiday Heist, and Home Alone 6 is Home Sweet Home Alone. Yeah, we're going to talk about those movies in a second, but just to say that the first sequel, Lost in New York, you know, this was a big deal because, like I said, they had to get Culkin while he was still like Kevin. And as a result, and like this is what I think there was like all sorts of different details I'm probably not going to get into, but like, you know, they fast tracked the script, which I think that and just really wanting to replicate the success is why the movie is like more or less just a complete lazy rehash of the original. But because the original is so amazing, it's still pretty fucking great. And the stuff that they changed, or the different aspects of it, or like the unique scenes, which we're going to talk about, like honestly, they stand up to me on the same level in some ways as the stuff in Home Alone 1. It's just that as a movie, if you watch Home Alone 1 and then you watch Home Alone 2, you should and rightfully be like given the feeling of, they really didn't go too far outside the box. They really colored it in those fucking lines, didn't they?
What are you talking about? They went to New York.
Yeah, I know. That's why they put that in the title. Literally Lost in New York, so you think it's a different movie when it's not. Like beat for beat is the exact same fucking movie. Yeah, Culkin got paid $4.5 million to be in that movie. They were like, I mean, his parents took all of that, and you know, we all know that mythology. Or if you don't, Google it. I'm not going to talk about it today because honestly, I'm not going to try to talk about MaCaulay Culkin too much at all beyond what he does as Kevin, because Kevin is really the focus of this podcast, as we'll get to. Oh, another weird little note about Home Alone, the original. I just read this like when I was looking stuff up for this movie, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. But apparently there's a French movie, I think from like the 60s or 70s or 50s, even maybe even earlier. I forget the details. I didn't look up everything about this movie because it was like so weird, but it's like not a well-seen movie. It's not a movie that was ever like released in the United States, which should tell you that this claim in and of itself is bullshit. But they try to claim that they wanted to sue Fox and Home Alone because their movie was a ripoff of Home Alone, which I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't buy that for 1 second. Now,
well, I mean, maybe they did Home Alone, but the French way, so it ends up all depressed and sad.
I read it's definitely depressed and sad, but I read the plot and it's not even that similar. I was like, what? Anyway, stupid stuff, but it's just very funny because of all the les incompetents of the first movie. Maybe that's why they got offended by that. Anyway, the main thing, Home Alone, and certainly my relationship to it, because the first movie came out the year I was born, so it wasn't like I was in theaters seeing it like an avid kid or anything. But like this movie, and the reason it's endured up into this day is because it like went from being this big box office smash that immediately made a cultural impact to essentially being like one of the best selling and seen VHS movies, one of the most syndicated like cable TV movies, certainly during the holiday season.
It became beloved by it's a part of American holiday season now.
Well, so
you can't get away from Home Alone. Like
you can't.
I don't know a family that doesn't have a holiday movie. Include watching Home Alone.
For sure. But I guess my question about that is, obviously I am going to stand for the quality itself of this movie, and we're going to get that. But I, like a lot of things, sometimes I think it's repetition is more important than quality. Like, I feel like the fact that you couldn't escape the movie, even if you wanted to, is why it is held up. And I think there's a reason for that is because, well, I think this on a roundabout way does speak to its quality, because like I'm sure you remember, like a lot of these cable channels or even networks during this time of year, they want holiday programming. And they have two choices. They can produce new holiday programming, which they they usually do every year, but it's like limited and they don't know what's going to land. Or they can go to the tried and true classics. And I think, you look at the amount of these things post Home Alone, or certainly because Home Alone comes in 1990, right before the cable and VHS era really take off. I mean, they both things existed throughout the previous decade, but I would say like the following decade is when they became like this overarching presence, right? Especially when it comes to kids media or family media or home media, right?
Sure.
So it kind of comes right at that moment and is the biggest thing related to Christmas at that moment. And so like a meme itself, they just replicate it. Now, because of that, more replicants of the replicant con. I'm not even talking about the Home Alone sequels. I think a lot of the Christmas movie, the modern, or now it's not even modern, but the Christmas movies of our growing up, they're all just modeled off of Home Alone. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's like they are the sons of Home Alone. Home Alone has its ancestors, but a lot of, if you look at like what tends to play in holiday programming that's pre-Home Alone, you're talking It's a Wonderful Life and Bacon Raskin.
Christmas
Story.
Like
Christmas Story,
Christmas
of course.
Story, yeah.
Christmas Story is probably the biggest one, but Christmas Story, A Wonderful Life, the Baskin and Ross, whatever the fuck those are called, stop motion animated stuff. And not much else. Like, I can't think of most of the Christmas movies that you see on ABC Family, even to this day and shit, or whatever it's called now, Freeform, are post Home Alone. They're post 90. They're like there's the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies. Those are all made after that. There's I'll Be Home for Christmas. All movies we're probably going to talk about next week, so I don't want to get too much into it. But like, just to say that, like, yeah, like, this movie is the sort of genesis. And I think it just, just again, because you and I are of the generation of like, I know Home Alone endures, and clearly they're trying to make Home Alone for the next generation as if
this generation doesn't have a cell phone. That's why it'll never work.
Oh my God. We'll talk about that with the new movie, because it's like, what? It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, look, on top of all of that, and this is where I tie it back into, it is about the quality of the film. I genuinely do think, and having just watched it again last night, even though it was probably the fourth digit time I've watched it, like, you wouldn't think that. In my head, it feels like parts of it feel like fresh and clean to me, as if I've never seen it before.
The cadence of the story is such that you're not bored of it. You know what I mean? It doesn't. I want to say the flow of it is such that there are enough pops of energy that you're like, oh, this is not just a movie that you watch passively. You can try to watch this movie passively, but you'll end up starting your chores and catching yourself sitting on the couch, stopping your chores and just watching it.
I mean, it is that rewatchable status in terms of like, you could come in at any part and you'll probably watch the rest of it. But
that's a lot to do here for me, specifically with the bad guys, with the Wet Bandits, by the way.
Yes.
The Wet Bandits is selling very well on the menu. And it's probably because I put a picture instead of a picture of a cocktail. I made a cocktail called the Wet Bandits, you guys. I made a cocktail called the Wet Bandits. And it's got mezcal, mango, cinnamon syrup, orange bitters, and a little bit of lemon, with a cinnamon stick for a garnish. Here's the reason it's selling well. Not just because it's delicious, but instead of a picture of a cocktail, I used a picture of the Wet Bandits on the menu. People love it. It's a bunch of cocktails and then a picture of Marv, basically.
Yeah.
Next to the ingredients.
Oh, that's great.
If anybody's in West Hollywood, come grab one while it's still on the menu as the Wet Bandit. Kind of funny.
No, totally.
I have to use a picture of them. I can't use a picture of a drink like a loser. It's called the Wet Bandits.
I mean, they do have an iconic silhouette, which is to my point, like everything in this movie is just like, honestly, that's what I get when I rewatch it. It's like every single scene, every single moment, almost every line is like iconic to me in some way. Maybe not to everyone, but I think to almost everyone. That's kind of the point. And like, that's what I mean about it being this, like, even pre-internet, this like total meme machine, or it's just like every little thing. Like, I don't want to get into the quote off right now, but like, you know, and to your point about the Wet Bandits, I think when I watch this movie, the thing that strikes me most now, and has for like a number of years now, is they got Joe fucking Pesci in a PG movie.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And it's not like he's phoning it in. Like, that's the funniest part too.
No. He's really being, I mean, he's a real good bad guy, no matter where he plays it. He can be a gangster bad guy or this like robbing a 10-year-old bad guy. He's the best bad guy in any form.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll just like, so, you know, and you know, definitely shouts to Daniel Stern as Marv, but like
Daniel Stern.
Yes. And he's also great. And like, they're the duo. It's like not just one way, but
yeah, you need them both.
But it's interesting. So originally Harry, the part Joe Pesci plays, they had offered it to Robert De Niro.
You're kidding.
so they knew they had this ambition to be like, we want like a Scorsese film gangster to be in this movie. Like that's what that was a genuine ambition they have. And when De Niro first turned it down, they actually did try to pivot a little bit in a slightly different direction. They went to John Lovitz, who I guess also ultimately turned it down, which is interesting. But like, you can tell he still got the look. He's someone who would like parody that shit on SNL, right?
Yeah.
And then,
I mean, he doesn't seem nearly as believable as a criminal, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe
it could have been funnier.
It's hard to top. Pesci's very funny.
It's hard to top it. Yeah, I see. But I think if you had Lovitz in there, like, what would we have gotten? I don't know.
True. Well, it was a similar, well, not exactly the same, but like a similar, like, I think we're going to talk about this with a few different characters, but like, there was like this, they kind of went around the bend sometimes with the casting of this film. So in the case of Daniel Stern as Marv, he was hired. He had great chemistry with Pesci. They like determined that, but they weren't willing to pay him what he wanted. So he dropped out. Then they bring in Daniel Roebuck, and he was lacking chemistry with Pesci. So like it turned, Christopher Columbus ended up like just coming to beg to say, can we work something out with Daniel Stern, please? Like, we need him. So obviously it got worked out, and then he returns along with Pesci for Home Alone 2, which, even though it's like, you could say it's part of why the film feels so recycled, Home Alone 2 is not a good movie without Marv and Harry. Like,
no,
that's kind of like what
is
part of the indelible ingredients of what makes the sort of 100%. Sauce, if you will. Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of those indelible legacies or ingredients, I would also, be remiss not to mention the role John Williams' score plays in the film. And I mean, we talk about the cultural touchstones, or what has endured or even become, in some senses, separated from the film.
Yeah. All you have to do is hear like, 3 bars. Da, na, na. And that's all you need. That's all you need. You can hear it from anywhere, and that's Home Alone. I have to say, the Home Sweet Home Alone really let me down on that front. There was a couple of ways it let me down, but I think the main way for me, like, I didn't get the feels because I didn't have the music to give me the feels. Well, in many instances. They
reused a lot of that.
They reused a little bit. Yeah, they reused it.
It made me want to like go and I didn't kill people every time.
They reused it in a new way, and it wasn't at the right moments for me. It was just a little bit in the beginning, and then you catch it at, like thrown in there. But there wasn't those long moments where the music sets the tone that I think Home Alone has. It's setting a tone, and it's giving you a feel for the place and the space. And I think in this new Home Sweet Home Alone, it's just kind of added in there, maybe as an afterthought. It's not used as an instrument of tone.
No, it's an absolute cheap bait at like forcing trying to import the emotions from the original movie into a movie that is devoid of any actual emotion or anything worthwhile. I fucking can't stand this new movie. I'm going to rip it to death and stomp on it and burn it. And I've never actually made a point of doing this on the podcast before with any movie, but
no, you don't use those words typically, but yeah, I had a feeling. And I have to be honest, I thought I would have more positive things because I'm kind of the good cop.
You are positive.
Podcast.
You are the good
I'm
cop.
kind of the
you
positive.
Are the good cop.
I'm definitely the glass half full cinephile and Cinphomaniac. And I think I expected to have more to counter your the stomping. However, I think it may be one of those instances where you grab my hand and help me up into that vat of grapes, and we're going to be doing a little stomping together today.
I think so, but like
one and only time that we're both going to be stomping on something together.
I think you would be hard pressed to disagree with most of what I'm going to say. Some of it maybe goes a lot farther than you're willing to go.
Well, yeah, sure. You're definitely going to think I'm reaching on the few positive notes that I have. That's fine.
Well, I'll let you get your positive notes in there. Don't get me wrong, but let me just be very clear. I want to talk about a few quick things before we fully get into Home Sweet Home Alone. But I was not originally planning to talk at all about that movie.
I
was like, I ain't gonna see it.
Yeah, well, everyone's watching it. Everyone's talking
everyone
about
watching
it.
I think a lot of people have a big stay away sign on it. But I'll just say, like, I was not planning on talking about it. This was like, fuck that movie already, just because we don't need it. This is about the original Home Alone. This is what matters. And I'll get to what this was. Some article I popped up, read about it. And after I read that, I was like, there's no way I'm not going to comment on this. I need to watch this movie, even though I'm pretty sure I'm going to hate it. Yes, I'll talk about it in a second. I don't want to spoil it yet. I don't want to spoil it yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so to not delay too much on that, we have John Williams' score. I think what's really notable about it is just the fact that it sounds so much like not only classical music, but classical Christmas music that I think it just seamlessly blends in and it's literally used this way on like your typical Christmas radio or something. Like people probably know it's from Home Alone, especially if you're talking about the main theme for sure, but some of those other themes as well. Like I think people just think it's Christmas music at this point. They don't even realize that's from Home Alone.
Actually a soundtrack.
Like, yeah.
You're actually listening to a movie soundtrack, you guys.
You're listening to a movie soundtrack. Now, here's the thing though. When I talk about, and this is a little tease for what's coming up in bed, when I talk about what really gets people going about Home Alone, maybe it's just me, but I don't think so. I'm going to make a case for why it's not just me. It's the violence. It's the violence that really gets people going.
Well, it's very well done.
Oh yeah.
I think probably my favorite part of the violence is the blowtorch pattern on Joe Pesci's head is like a flower. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Like a star. And that was
it does gross me out. Like
it grosses you out as it should. But here's the thing. That's really what it would look like. The blowtorch, the heat would go to the outside and you would have
I noticed it. I noticed it last night, like that it was like more realistic than I remember.
Oh, it's all really shiny. Weird. That's exactly what a burn looks like. The special effects makeup on this movie was seamless.
Well, they still had to keep it PG. We're going to talk about that, but I just will say two other things I want to just go through real quick before we get to Home Sweet Home Alone. Just good lead-ins, right? I think when I first teased this pod, I mentioned there's a lot of theories about Home Alone online, which there are. None of them are really my thesis. If there may be two little slight tie-ins, I'll note them when we get to them. But I think it's fun if I just and I don't know if you've heard these, talk to you about some of these what I consider to be quite laughable clickbait article theories about Home Alone. That I'm like, dude, like, where's the evidence for any of this in the movie other than like the most bizarre circumstantial extrapolations? But I mean, that's what makes it fun. And it makes it fun that they're just so dumb and silly. Okay. So first one, and you could fit this in the category of like, maybe only slightly more plausible. Well, I'll let you decide what you think is plausible or makes sense or profoundly stupid.
I like being the decider.
Yeah, sure. Pretend I'm your BuzzFeed article and you're just reading it. Okay. Kevin's dad is a gang leader, as in like a gangster. Do you ever realize that? Why is Mr. McCalister like? Not only is he rich, but when they never say what his job is. But notice that when Joe Pesci comes in as the cop, he's like, "Am I under arrest?" Like as if he expected to be.
Ooh.
Okay, that's the first one.
I think. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to be the decider and say hard no for this. He's making a dad joke. He's a dad. Who am I under arrest or something?
Exactly.
What are you doing in my house?
Exactly. So second one. Uncle Frank is the real villain. And there's really no substance behind the stare and say, isn't Uncle Frank bad? I'm like, yes, that's not a theory. Everyone knows
everybody
this.
has one family member that's kind of a dick. We're not a normal family if you don't have one person that's kind of a dick. And he plays a very important role because without him, no one would believe this as a family. I barely believe it now with all those kids.
Here's one that the next one I think is like, I honestly don't even understand a single piece of evidence for this. So I'm just like, what?
Okay.
What a weird take is Kevin's father hates him. What? I'm like,
he
okay.
didn't go look for him.
I think that's the point. I'm like, right. Well, someone had to stay with the rest of their children.
Someone had to stay with all the other kids. Yeah, you have to. That's how parenting. I'm assuming.
Oh, little preview for coming up. I'm going to go through all the McCalister family members one by one, so everyone knows who they are. Because it actually took me years to get this sorted.
There are a million of them.
Yeah, there are.
You need a map. You need a map.
I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you the family tree.
Oh my God! Put the family tree on the YouTubes so people can see the tree.
Oh, that's a good idea. And I will do that.
Yeah, guys, if you want the layout of the map, check out this video.
The next one is like a legit theory, silly as it is. Old Man Marley is Kevin from the future.
Well, did he discover a portal?
It's unclear. It might be like I think it's supposed to be like Christmas Carol kind of like magic,
Christmas
if you will.
future, ghost of future past or
but
whatever.
Basically, the idea is like Kevin grows up, he's estranged from his family, so he goes back in time and like warns his younger self basically about the value of family. That's the idea. At least that one has a point.
I actually don't hate that as much as the other two because it kind of. I mean, but what are the odds that he would grow up and buy the house next door to himself? But
if the whole point is to make contact, then
it's to make contact. I don't know. The other real thing was as soon as he picks himself up, he should explode or disappear.
Let me put it this way: it's not exactly in continuity with this new Home Alone movie, but whatever.
Yeah.
Next one is like, okay, is the McCalisters are a cult. That's why they have so many kids.
Like a sister wives situation?
No, just more like they're like pretend all the kids maybe are not literally all necessarily biological, and even Uncle Frank and these people, they're just followers. It's like the master. Think of it like that. And I guess that makes Peter McCalister, the dad, the master. I don't know. It doesn't really work. I get where they're getting it from, but it's still stupid. The only thing I think is because it really seems like Mrs. McCalister kind of runs the show. For a lot of women don't lead the cults. That's not women don't lead the cults with the man. One or the other. There was a female cult leader who died last month, I think. Really? She was a very famous female cult leader. I'll have to read about this because I don't know any female cult leaders. I'll send you it. This one is just, you can tell it's just the laziest, stupidest. Like, let's just take another movie and apply it. You didn't even try. This one is. Kevin is dead. Like, it's the Sixth Sense. Come on. Yeah, that's not anything. You didn't even try. Here's one that's like even really like what? Like, this is just some weird fanfiction. Peter McCalister, the dad, is in the CIA and training secret agents. Like that this whole thing was a test that he made for Kevin's future career as a spy. I'm like, what? But stupid. Meaning like he threw away that ticket on purpose. He picked out Kevin's ticket from all that mess of wet, milky tickets and decided that he was going to throw away just Kevin's. But he didn't even spill the milk. How does he know the milk's going to be spilled? How does he know any of that's going to happen to throw away just Kevin's ticket? Pass. Skip it. Didn't even try. Actually, it does.
And the CIA, come on.
Yeah. Well, it would make sense that he was CIA rather than any other agency. But I'll just say, anyway, this next one, I almost kind of like. It's pretty dumb, but I like it. I get the idea. John Candy, as Gus Plazinski, is the devil. And that's how he takes Miss McCalister home. It's like she made a deal with the devil, and that's how she's able to get home to Kevin for Christmas or whatever.
She does say if she has to make a deal with the devil himself, but what does she give him? Doesn't the devil want your soul?
Well, that's the idea, that she did give him his soul. She did give him her soul, and she now has to I don't know how giving souls works. It's different in every fucking movie I've ever seen.
Do you give me your soul type of thing?
Well, it might happen off screen because it cuts from the airport to they're in the back of the truck. So it could have happened off screen. Anyway, the last two, and this is what I call these are the two that actually are, well, in the forums, you might read them in these clickbait articles, a bit out of whack. And specifically the tie into this other movie is definitely not literal. I would say they are much closer to the ultimate thesis of Home Alone. I think the fact that people are saying these things shows me that they're a little bit more clued into some of the aspects of Home Alone than they might think they are. And well, this first one, which I say is the close, not the closer, is almost again another one where it's well, duh. But yeah, so this theory is Buzz is a psychopath. I'm like, duh. But the fact that you point this out shows me they're at least getting closer.
The only thing that made me think Buzz is normal is the Ice-T poster he has in his room. That's a dope ass poster.
Yes, we're gonna talk about Buzz's room because it's there's a lot of stuff in there that are interesting to me. The last one. This is the big one. This is the one that I think most people go crazy about, and it's a tie into a different movie franchise, but one that I do think has a relationship to Home Alone that we're going to talk about. Kevin is the Jigsaw killer, like the guy from Saw.
Wait, what?
Yes, that Kevin is the child version of Jigsaw, and then he grows up to be Jigsaw. And what he's doing to Harry and Marv is him practicing his future Jigsaw torture batteries, essentially. And again, I would say closest. This is more or less where I'm going to start going with a lot of this stuff. But before we can get to that, we got to talk about the shitquels. Okay, not the sequels, the shitquels. The shitquels.
The shitquels.
Basically, Home Alone 3, 4, 5. Well, we don't need to talk about them because I haven't watched them in years. I never saw 4 or 5. I saw 3 a long time ago.
I saw them a long time ago. Yeah.
Never saw 4 or 5. Don't need to. I'm you know what? If kids grew up liking them, whatever kids did, good for you. Have fun. That's fine. They don't have anything to do with Home Alone to me. However, in Home Alone 6, aka Home Sweet Home Alone, would have also had nothing to do with Home Alone. And now here's actually, I should say before we go any further on this Home Sweet Home Alone thing. Spoiler warning for this movie. I am going to say everything that happens in this movie because everything that's happened in this movie is awful. I have to. It's the only way people really get how bad it is. So yeah, it's going to give you all the spoilers of the plot, but more importantly, I think it's going to spoil your potential life. Spare yourself this pain and skip ahead. I'll give a time code in the description of the pod on YouTube. Skip ahead. Don't listen to this. If you just came here to enjoy a nice podcast where we talk about what's interesting about a movie you love, aka Home Alone, or even Home Alone 2 Lost in New York, great, do that. I don't mean to take your time with this dredge. However, if you're curious to see how wrong things can go in life, then you need to hear what I'm about to tell you. So now I'll review what I was referring to before about why I decided to, against my better judgment, sit and watch this movie, why I felt compelled to sit and watch this movie.
Because I told you I was going to watch it.
No, even when you told me that was not enough. I was like, you go do that. I'm not doing it. I saw this article come up on Vulture. It was just a very short, 3-question interview with Rob Delaney. Now, Rob Delaney is the actor who plays Jeff, who I'll explain who Jeff is in a moment, but he's one of the main characters of this new movie, the adult father, right? Mm-hmm. Rob Delaney, I'm not too familiar with him. I know he was on the show Catastrophe that was a lot of people really loved.
I can't say I've seen a lot of his work either, if I'm being honest.
No, but I've only heard good things about him.
I've seen his face, but I have
not.
Yeah,
and I have no, let me be very clear. I have absolutely no will towards him. I don't want to,
ill will?
Yeah, I'll just leave it at him. I'm not going to mention the other people in the movie. Like, not to say I have ill will against them by definition, but I just don't know if I want to make the same kind of blanket statement. Anyway, I've definitely no ill will towards Rob Delaney. From what this article even implied, none of which I knew, he seems to be a pretty good guy, and a guy who cares about good things, in my opinion. And what I'm referring to is this article goes, oh, aren't you like, you're very active in politics and you're not afraid to be vocal about this or that. And I think it's really interesting watching this movie because you're getting beat up by this spoiled rich kid. It's like, this is what the leading interview question says, mind you. It's like, it's kind of like, this movie's about class warfare. And Rob Delaney was basically like, and again, it's written down, so I don't know what his actual tone or expression was. And so I'm going to give it the best faith reading, to which say he was just kind of like a little bit like, by the question, but like didn't want to like totally snuff out the point or say anything negative about his film. So he's probably like, so what he said was just like, oh, no, totally. Yeah, no, it's very true. Yeah, no, yeah, it is like that, isn't it? Like, right, is what he said. When I read that they're saying this movie is about class warfare, I'm like, well, now I need to see it. Not in the least because of what I'm going to talk about with the original Home Alone and how I think it is like everything you need to know about American society and culture is in Home Alone. Spoiler. I'm like, oh, well, I doubt the movie's going to be good. It's not like I'm suddenly thinking the movie's going to be good. In fact, I'm pretty convinced it's still going to suck. But that's what makes it interesting. I'm like, I know it's going to suck, but it's trying to say something, like it has a message. Let me watch this. I want to see how they deal with that. Well, Dana,
yeah, that's interesting that she led with that question.
It was very weird. I don't, yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know.
She's seen it, I assume. Otherwise, why are you interviewing
people about? Right. Exactly. That's what is certainly implied in what you think. But just so that I don't think this interviewer is like demented, I'm going to almost say that she's a liar and she never saw the movie. She just heard some basic stuff about what it's about. And then
why would you lead with that question if you've seen this movie?
Because I think if you've seen the movie, you know that this movie is like the Antichrist towards anything you might be thinking about that.
It doesn't give me a feeling that it's about class wars necessarily. I mean, maybe if I'm digging, it doesn't seem...
Oh no, it's class warfare. The movie is class warfare in the wrong direction. And it's pretty, so like this is where I'm going to get into it. Okay. So just right out the gate, I'm only pointing this out because it's like, it's probably the first thing anyone's going to notice about the movie. And it's like, oh, okay, this is my tie-in. Is one of the first things you see is that these homes have McCalister home security on them. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, okay, this movie's not a remake. It takes place in the continuity of the original two movies, or I guess maybe all of them. It's hard. I don't know. I can't speak to that. It's not a remake in that sense. Even though it ultimately kind of is in a fucked up way. And it's taking place in the modern times. So it's been 31 years and Kevin McCalister would be a grown-up. Maybe he has a business. Maybe he has this business. That's all going to be confirmed in a later scene. But like, that's maybe the first thing you're thinking. But the next thing you're going to notice, and this is where the actual conversation of this movie starts, is that this movie is told from two sets of point of view. The first point of view is the point of view you're probably expecting, which is the point of view of some kid. That kid is named Max Mercer. He's played by Archie Yates, the little boy from Jojo Rabbit, not the main one, but the
best friend boy who becomes a commander.
The round boy. We all know what we're talking about.
He's very cute, you guys. He's so cute.
Oh, he's got his big eyes and whatnot. But,
he's so cute.
I'm going to tell you, Dana, if I never thought this kid was cute, but if I did, I'm sorry. I feel bad for Archie Yates for this, but I can't stand this kid. I cannot stand him. And
I still like him. Even after this.
He is so bad in this fucking movie. I'm just like, I'm sorry. I got to rip off the Band-Aid. I can't, just because he's a little kid. I can't just talk around it. I mean, this is, by the way, we're at like 1 degree mild right now. I have not fired up at all yet. But I'll just say, to me, it goes for granted. You can take it for granted. He's this obnoxious British kid, but he's the son of some rich American father, and they live in some newer suburban McMansion sort of development, but it's still Winnetka, Illinois, right? Just like the original film. And he's just this spoiled lame kid. Like, there's nothing interesting about him whatsoever. This is very important. I'm going to keep highlighting what's the difference between this kid and Kevin, and what's the difference between this kid and any person who's a worthwhile protagonist. But yeah, this kid is just like totally boring and lame. There's nothing interesting about him. He's just some stupid kid. And the scenes that you see with him that's going to start it are scenes that just rehash the same shit from the original. It's like there's this extended family that's scrambling around for the holiday. They're trying to get to Japan. It's Japan instead of France, whatever. It's like, it's just kind of silliness. And all this actual substance of those scenes from the early parts of the original Home Alone, completely absent.
Yeah, something about Max that I noticed from the first one is that exactly what you just said. That scene, the family isn't really that mean to him compared to Kevin's family. They're like a little bit annoying.
They're not even anything. There's like tall talking past each other.
Yeah, they're just kind of ignoring him, but they're not giving that sense of like he's being bullied by the older kids. That sense of injustice that gets Kevin riled up.
Right.
You know, you did it on purpose. You ate my pizza on purpose. You guys are picking on me on purpose. That gets him all, really wishing to where he says it twice.
Well, let me tell you, what you're talking about is exactly my point about the lack of substance. And
yeah, we don't get the feeling that he's bullied. I don't feel sorry for him. I don't feel sorry for him yet. You know what I mean? I don't feel sorry for him. And I don't identify with him either.
You don't identify with him, but that's exactly the point, Dana. So
yeah,
this shows you how backwards the priorities of this movie are, or like how inept and stupid the motherfuckers who made it are, is that they probably thought that like, we can't do that because we don't want bullying or like to normalize bullying. Well, okay, but you realize the purpose of that in the context of the Home Alone film, that your film is completely lacking. Never mind all the fucked up shit your movie's about to do, which I'd say is way worse than any bullying. Okay. That shit is what makes Kevin a protagonist. That's the shit that makes him so that you, exactly what you said, identify with him, so that you understand that he has adversity. This kid has none. So that's all of it. But the real point that we need to get to is, meanwhile, as in the film shifts its point of view, there's these other two characters. They're actually technically introduced first, but these characters are named Jeff and Pam, not Jim and Pam, Jeff and Pam. It's going to get hard for me to keep saying that. But yeah, and obviously the person who plays Pam, Ellie Kemper, was on The Office, so it's even weirder. Jeff is Rob Delaney, who we mentioned, and Pam is Ellie Kemper. And Jeff is, as we're introduced to what his adversities are right away. Interesting. He's a laid off white collar worker who does data migration. He was a data migration manager, and he can't find a new job after getting laid off his previous one, because the same reason he was laid off, presumably, the tech industry no longer needs his particular skill set. Data migration isn't a thing anymore.
The iCloud.
Yeah, it's the cloud. Yeah, they're a little yada-yadaing about what they're trying to talk about there, but whatever. I that's fine. That's totally forgivable. Sure. The point is exactly
the
that,
technical
right?
jargon. You don't need to understand it to understand what's happening.
Right. It's like he basically was Rob Livingston in Office Space, and
yes,
and then like now it's like 2021, so it doesn't make sense anymore. So anyway, they have two young kids, and they live in this house that they are having to sell. They have to sell it because daddy lost his job. Seems like the mom doesn't have a job, but either way, they can't afford to live in their house. The brother, Hunter, who's played by Tim Simons, comes over, and he's got his like wife, who's like all like material girl.
I have to say, he was fantastic.
In
that
like
actor
one
was
scene.
The best. No, in all the scenes, I'm like, I hate.
But he's really only important in that first scene. And I was like confused why the character was even there. Honestly, I was like, why is this character here? Because I assume when they're introducing him, he was going to have more of a role in the story, but of course not.
Yeah, I thought he's like the Derek brother from Step Brothers. He comes in with like the quote unquote perfect family just to make you feel like shit about yours.
Literally what it is. Yeah.
But I mean, they didn't sing in the car, but
like, it's like, he's not, it's implied like he's, when I say upwardly mobile, I mean, it's implied that like, he talks about it quite literally. Oh, I made a lot of money this year.
Wealthy,
yeah, but it's not, but that's the difference. It's not implied that he's necessarily rich, but either way, it's like the hanging chad of this story ought to be, do I tell my brother what's going on, which I guess is kind of there, but it's irrelevant, or B, do I ask my brother for money, and why or I might not do that, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah, that would have been actually a nice little scene of grappling with himself, of like, I could just ask him to help us. He clearly is spending ridiculous amounts of money on Christmas gifts, trying to show off his money. Maybe he can help us with the house.
Right. But
that's not even an option. He doesn't even think about that or talk about it. And that would have made him more endearing to us, thinking, oh man, we've all been in a situation where like, I need something, I don't want to ask anybody for it, and it's awkward, even if it's something small. Sometimes people have trouble asking for favors, and that would have made me identify with not Jan. What was his name?
Jeff.
What if I Jan? Damn it, The Office keeps haunting me. I would have identified with Jeff, and it would have made him more endearing. Instead, it's like it's Ellie Kemper's job to fix this, that he lost the job. She takes it upon herself. Like, she's the one who's like, got the nerves of steel to try to save the house.
They introduced the character. He's completely pointless. He's just a pointless character. So Jeff, realizing, okay, I have no other options. I'm not going to go to my brother. My brother serves no purpose. I need to find a way to make enough money so I don't have to sell my house. Because of course I don't want to sell my house. It doesn't really need to be explained. And it isn't really. What he does is, he remembers a conversation, because earlier him and Max have this interaction. I'm not really going to get into it, but basically the way you're introduced to even the Max characters, for some reason, the mom wants to stop at this open house. They go in. The kid is, again.
Oh, I thought he had to go to the bathroom or something.
Is that what it was? Okay.
He had to go to the bathroom, and she's like, oh, fine, we'll just stop at this open house.
Even more disgusting, actually. I'm glad I didn't caught that. That just makes the whole disgusting fucking way this movie is even worse. So anyway, they brings the kid in because they just, whatever. Who gives a fuck about these people that are losing their house? Let's just go in and fucking piss in it. So they fucking go in, and the little kid's just being a stupid little shit. And the Jeff is just like, oh, okay. Like, he's awkward around the kid, even though he has his own kids. It's like weird. And he mentions, oh, that doll is worth a bunch of money or something. So anyway, Jeff later remembers that conversation. So he goes looking it up on eBay and sees that you can sell these dolls for like $200,000. And he's like, oh shit, if I could just sell that doll, then all our problems might be solved. So he goes in, he looks for the doll, but the doll is missing. So because he thought that kid, Max, was a stupid little shit, just like I do, he immediately assumes, oh, that kid must have stolen it, right?
Yeah.
So he then goes over to the house of the kid and like, sees what he thinks it is in the window, which is just like a bulge in this kid's jacket pocket. It's very flimsy storytelling, as we'll get back to. The whole thing is bullshit, but it's very flimsy story. So he's convinced this kid has this doll, and now his only option is breaking the doll. Anyway, meanwhile, getting back to Max and the familiar beats of Home Alone, Max awakens in the morning to find that his family has left without him.
He goes to hide in the car because he feels like he can't get any attention. So he's like, screw you guys. I'm going to go watch a movie in the car, because their family's car has one of those screens on the back of the driver's seat.
So fucking stupid. Oh my God.
Yeah.
You just, again, remind me another thing that's so fucking maddening.
Yeah. Why would you go in there? He's not allowed to have the internet or something, or he doesn't.
I don't know what it is. I don't give a shit about him going in the car. I just care about the fact that what you just said, that, oh, he goes in because he's not getting attention. Oh my God. He goes in because he's not getting attention. Yeah, that's what happens in the original film. Okay. Really fucking ridiculous. Anyway, he again, because now it's like, oh, I wake up, my family disappeared. You get the cheap rehash montage of kid bullshit but it's with this totally unlikable and uninteresting, uncharismatic, stupid kid. So who cares? It's not like you're watching the original Home Alone at all, for obvious reasons. Meanwhile, Jeff is convinced, like I said, they should break into the Mercer house. He tells Pam she's not having it because she's like, well, we're not thieves. Like, what? But then we get this scene Hunter, this is the only other thing the Hunter, the uncle has any significance towards, is that there's a scene the kids watching what appears to be an Angels with Filthy Souls sci-fi remake, and they get to make this how clever joke about how remakes remakes why has Hollywood always got to remake stuff and make it bad?
To change your filthy animal. It doesn't make sense because they're in space. Why would you have change for anything?
Well, the point is they think it's stupid, and it is stupid. So they think they're being like funny by having this joke. And it's like, no, dude, your movie is so bad. It's like, it's way infinitely worse than even a self-deprecating joke could ever possibly encapsulate. Right. But what's really important is immediately after this moment, Pam looks over at her family and remembers that she's losing her house and is racked with this guilt, this deep guilt. And this guilt becomes this vision where she sees this alternative universe of this consumerist gift-filled holiday that she won't be having for her family. And in that, because of that shame and that longing that she's feeling in this visceral sensation, she immediately flips the switch and decides, fuck it, we are going to steal that goddamn doll. Fuck that kid.
But I think it's also, if you noticed in her vision, the kids are babies again. So like this house contains all the memories of their childhood.
I did not notice that. I could have sworn it was like a present day thing.
The kids are little, and she's remembering their first and second Christmases in this house. And she gets sad because she knows that they're leaving the house. So it's like, oh, all of my children's memories of Christmas is here. And we have to keep it.
Well, yeah. So upon breaking in later when they come in, right? Because they're basically Pam and Jeff, Pam and Jeff fucking get in, decide, okay, fuck it, we're gonna get there. So they get in, and as they're like breaking in, Max is like waking up because they don't even think he's there, so they're not even really trying to be quiet, which again is stupid. And they hear them. Max hears Jeff and Pam talking about taking the ugly little boy. And he assumes that they're talking about himself, not this doll. And it's just this, ultimately, what it feels like this whole thing is a convenient way to soften the point of view of Max so as not to make him just a good old defender of his private property. Nevertheless, he's not quite ready yet at this stage, seemingly, for his PG-rated torture porn debut. So he calls the police on them instead. And who answers? Buzz McCalister. Right? So here's what's interesting about this whole Buzz thing, right? And all these were choices that they made. He answers the phone, and he's revealed to be a plainclothes cop, and he portrays this character not at all like Buzz we knew, but just as like a dumb plainclothes cop stereotype, like the guy who's eating his donuts and just doesn't give a shit, right? And like that's not at all as what Buzz the character was at all in the original Home Alone. Not at all.
He blames all the calls on Kevin. He's like,
well, I didn't get to that yet. Because that technically happens after this.
Oh, I thought that was the same time he's eating the donut.
Well, technically, yeah, that part is, but he's eating a burrito actually. But the point is the same
burrito.
Thing. It's the same thing. The point is that he shows up there and you just see the McCalister badge. So, if you know, you know, but like it's pretty evident. And immediately, again, playing to what I'm saying about the way they just portray him as a dumb plainclothes cop stereotype, he immediately just is totally swayed by the simple and ridiculous flirting of Ellie Kemper as Pam, who's kind of giving off some version of the dry blowjob meme vibe that she created. I don't know if you know about that. Do you know about that? Oh,
no.
I have a video to send for you from back in the day. But anyway, I can't watch Ellie Kemper in anything, especially when she's flirting and not think of this. Anyway, so Buzz, this is the important point about this. Buzz is a cop, not an employee, presumably, of his brother Kevin's lucrative armed security corporation. How telling is that? But seeing that Buzz lets Jeff and Pam go, and then having his own little weird visions of his parents being sent to jail for the crime of leaving him home alone, weird, Max reaches the conclusion that the police are not to be trusted and they'll have to defend his property by himself. So also, this is at the point where they hand wave the most absurd plot hand wave I've ever seen, where he can't call his parents because the home bot, the VI like Alexa thing, doesn't make voice calls. What the fuck? First off, all those things make voice calls. Second of all, what?
Is there a way that you can lock it so your kid can't make voice calls?
It doesn't say it's because a kid. It just says it can't do it.
I wonder if it's because, I don't have.
Well, it doesn't matter because the writers just wrote it that way. The writers just wrote it that way. And that in of itself is what's stupid about it. Because it's just a lazy hand wave with no thought behind it. Doesn't actually add up or make any sense. It's not something someone ever thought of other than as a cheap convenience. And it's not even convenient. It just doesn't make sense. So, of course, then we finally do get back to this mom character. And oh man, do I have a lot to say about this absolute imposter, disgusting imposter. Anyway, I'll say that for a moment later. She calls the mom, realizing that obviously her son is missing, calls the Winnetka police, and that's when you get the scene where Buzz is in the cop car getting it, and we get the full reveal that yes, Buzz is Buzz. Kevin is his brother. Kevin is the head of the security company. And he says basically that, yeah, don't listen to this call. It's obviously a prank because every year Kevin does this shit to me to remind me of the time that me and my family left him home alone twice. Right. So, the only thing interesting there in terms of the lore that I think actually does fit together with what I'm going to say about the real Home Alone later is, yes, Kevin is still a bastard who tortures people. So anyway.
But it would also make sense that he would be like, you can't work for my company. Yeah.
No, I don't know about that. See, that's fucked up. Well, I'll
Why
say
is
that
his brother not working security for his company and he's making probably $55 grand a year as a cop instead of working for this multi-billion-dollar company?
Exactly. He doesn't look, if you think Buzz is stupid, fine, give him some bullshit job. But at least don't make him go risk getting shot as a police officer. Yeah. When you could just whatever, pay him. It's terrible. Anyway, the next day at church, yes, it's that church from Home Alone 1, totally misused here. Jeff and Pam are there. They're there to watch. This is the most fucked up scene. This is the scene, by the way, where after this, I was already like, this movie's shit, but this is the scene that made me, this movie is an irredeemable, disgusting piece of trash. And this is the scene. This is where I'm going to start to really get off. Okay. Or go off.
You haven't started yet?
No, not even remotely. Max shows up to this church. And apparently what made him show up is that he's wandering around the neighborhood for some reason and saw a sign that says toys for kids in need. Okay. Max goes up to this toys for children in need and tries to take the toys. And the old woman running it goes to him like, hey, and he's like, give me a shopping cart. I'm like, oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't get the memo before, but I get it now. Okay. Then he goes, when it's explained to him by the old lady that these are toys for kids less fortunate than him, he shrugs it off and with zero recognition of what it means or any of his privilege involved. He's just utterly disinterested in the entire concept of children in need. Then to make it fucking way worse, Jeff and Pam's own son comes in. He doesn't know Max. They don't know each other. And he's holding this big Nerf gun that they're donating. This family who can't afford their house, by the way, they're donating this toy for the church fund. And he talks to Max and confesses that he knows his parents are stressed. Like he's talking about Jeff. It's like, they don't think I know, but I know they're stressed out. A very real and relatable thing a kid in his circumstance would be going through. Max, again, showing zero recognition in total narcissism, implies that he has it just as bad as him. Yeah, I have it so bad, man. Like, my parents don't care about me. It's like, what? And the son, Jeff and Pam's son, ends up feeling bad for Max. So much so that he gives him the fucking Nerf gun. The Nerf gun for the children in need. Then the kid leaves. The old lady comes back in, sees Max with the toy, and tries to take it back because she knows Max ain't some fucking child in need. But Max, with no context, then says he has no parents and that that makes the old lady feel so bad for him that she lets him keep the Nerf gun. And to all this, I really have to say, in my best Richard Wolff voice impression, disgusting. This is fucking disgusting shit that they are perpetrating in this movie of trying to make this bizarre and truly detestable equivocation about what this Max kid is going through, a kid that they're depicting as basically doesn't have a care in the world and is just a boring, uninteresting dweeb, as having like, oh, but my problems are, and I know that they think it's funny. They think it's funny that there's some sort of misunderstanding here. It's not funny. There's nothing fucking funny about it. Now, to make it even worse, Max's mom, Mrs. Mercer, is now arriving at the airport to try to get back to her son. The whole scene and sequence of scenes is just a total parroting of the absolute GOAT Mrs. McCalister scenes with her amazing lines, but they lack all impact when they're repeated in this way. And look, no offense to this actor who plays Mrs. Mercer, but she's totally unsympathetic and is an insult to the character and the brilliance of Catherine O'Hara. Just an insult, just total insult. And it's like, just no, please God, no to all of this. The fact that they think it's funny that when she's on the plane, I mean, honestly, the comparison knows no bounds between all the scenes you have of Mrs. McCalister and what her focus and attention is on. My son, my son, my son. And then you fucking have these scenes where Mrs. Mercer's on the plane and there's some guy awkwardly looking at her mirror. Like, oh, what a disgusting.
Why is that bothering her? I wrote it down. I'm like, why does this bother her so
If this was Curb Your Enthusiasm, I'd be like, whatever.
I would be more upset at the end of the scene when he's physically drooling on her than at him looking at my screen. But when he's drooling on her, she just kind of shrugs and goes and like endures it. I'm like, why would you endure someone physically touching you?
The subtext of this scene is that I should be in first class. Why the fuck am I next to this fat asshole who's like drooling on me or looking at my screen? And that's my concern, not my son. Just this concern of this guy. Anyway, getting back to that opening, like the way we're even introduced, the reason she's so unsympathetic, okay, it's not even that scene. She was already unsympathetic to me before this scene happens. The reason she's absolutely nothing to do with the original Mrs. McCalister is because when we're introduced to her and Max, their actual interactions, their quote relationship that we're supposed to care about, meaning the only reason we care about Mrs. McCalister and her son reuniting is not because, oh my God, the son is home alone. We don't really give a fuck about that. It's a movie. We know he's going to be fine. Okay. It's because of their actual connection. This has none of this. This is the opposite of that. When her and Max are introduced in the opening scenes, they're fucking awful. They're the totally wrong tone. It's like, there's no talk of love and concern. There's no like actual, like grounding or like trying to empathize with each other or deal with their adversity or deal with what's going on in them internally. There's nothing. It's just an annoying, dull kid talking about how he has to fucking piss. It's like this kid is not Kevin, not even 0.00001% anything to do with that character. Ditto the mother. Okay. So now we get to have our great crap rehash of the booby trap planning scene. And there's been none of this buildup. There's been no actual real understanding. Because what we already know we're in for, because remember, the characters are not Harry and Marv. They're Jeff and Pam, who are treated like co-protagonists in the story. I would say rightfully so, except for the fact that they're totally neutered at every turn. And then ultimately the fact that we're going to spend the next 30 minutes of this movie watching them get tortured, even if it's slapstick style, just because it's a Home Alone movie. Okay. So suddenly Max, who up until this point, unlike with Kevin, as we're going to talk about, has no issues of seething rage, no anger, no disposition towards violence whatsoever from what we've seen. Now, all of a sudden he's like, I want to shoot a woman's face full of thumbtacks. That's what I'm down with. Like when Kevin does what Kevin does, it's built into the fabric of Kevin's character that he is violent and rage-filled. Like this is a fact that he is not a good impulse control person. Max is not written that way. Max is written as some dumb plebe who now all of a sudden thinks it's hilarious to shoot people's face full of thumbtacks. So yeah, now all of a sudden he's a torture-loving sadist. Interesting, out of nowhere. And again, who's he torturing? Jeff and Pam. Interesting. Just two parents who want to maybe have a home for their family. Great stuff. Really great stuff. So, of course, after this long sequence of blood sacrifice has been paid in full, Jeff and Pam are finally able, because this whole thing could have been avoided, mind you, if they just fucking talked for 1 second, are finally able to ask, hey, can you just give us our doll back? And of course, big surprising twist, not at all. Mac's like, I don't have your doll. And he never did. It was all a mistaken, a sort of just whatever, happenstance. So they then realize Max is home alone. And now, literally with fucking thumbtacks still in her face, Ellie Kemper's like, oh, I feel bad for you. You're the victim because you were left home alone. Not me and my husband who've just been brutalized for the last 25 minutes, or the fact that we're actually suffering and you're just, okay. No, it's you because you've been left home alone. And notice how now, even though it happens off screen, it's all of a sudden super simple to just call up the mom. Oh, just call her up. Just let her know. Just talk to her. Oh, simple. Oh, okay. Great. So they can just call her like that. I fucking hate this movie. There's more plot holes in it than Ellie Kemper's face, okay, at this point. It's just fucking insane.
One of the craziest ones for me, though, was when Jeff has, I don't know if you've ever put on one of these 3D goggles before.
Oh, yeah.
They are heavy. The VR goggles, the virtual reality goggles are heavy. You feel it on your head immediately. Your neck starts getting tired because they're heavy. How does he not notice and really think that he's somewhere like a cliff, that there's something that's 2.5 pounds on his head?
I mean, yeah. I mean, maybe his head's already throbbing in so much pain.
Yeah, it is.
But let's not give this movie an excuse.
I feel bad for him, and I feel bad for Ellie Kemper's character.
Well, Dana, just in case you thought we were done, this movie wasn't done.
Not done.
Oh, no. But I'm just saying, well, I'll say maybe you, the audience, just in case the audience thought we were done. No, the movie's not over yet. The last 15 minutes of the movie are the real you already hate us, so let's now fucking shoot more rounds of thumbtacks into your eyeballs. Okay, let's talk about what happens next. So Jeff and Pam, they're totally fine the next morning. There's a minor comment about sore ribs when the kids hug her. They're fine. There's no word as of yet. It will come up, thankfully. Not thankfully, but will come up in the very last moment of the movie. But no word yet on the mass destruction of the Mercer McMansion. Because the whole thing at the end of this round, that's the thing. In the original film, the house, there's a lot of bullshit going on, but there's no real damage to the house other than sticky stuff they have to remove from the floors. Here, the house is literally in shambles, demolished at the end.
Yeah,
it's for no reason. Okay.
She even says we wanted a remodel because,
no. That's hold on. We're gonna get to that line, and that's not in reference to the Mercer house. That's in reference to the other house, and it's no.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, but I'm gonna get to that because that was the moment where I actually got up and flipped the table over. So yeah, no word yet on the mass destruction there. The doll, the whole MacGuffin of this fucking film, turns out it's in the hands of Hunter's stupid little kid, who for no reason,
the most annoying.
Well, I mean, he's barely in the movie, but for no reason at that exact moment, decides to throw the doll, as though he's fucking Brett Favre. It's what? He throws the doll, and you get this weird slow-mo sequence of first Jeff misses it, then Pam misses it, and then fucking Max dive bombs and saves the doll. Now, in case it's not obvious, the reason this happens is so that to leave no stone unturned, we need to make sure you think Max at the end is a hero. He's a nice kid. He saved the family. He didn't put them through hell. He saved them because if that stupid kid broke the doll, they wouldn't have the money to save their house. Okay. Well, and then, just as the perfect timing convenience, Mrs. Mercer returns, and in the most hollow and insulting callback ever, they try to replicate the scene with the music and everything of the reunion between Mrs. McCalister and Kevin at the end of the Home Alone. And it's like, fuck this shit. Stop it. You need to stop it. Okay. And Pam literally says at that moment, you got a great kid. Never mind that he shot my face full of thumbtacks, tortured me all night. And when he fucking met me not 3 days earlier, as like, he was a nice, just like a spoiled little wanker is really all he was. Like, that's what he is. That's what he is. Spoiled little wanker. So we then get, just even the second I saw this title card, because the movie should be over here. 1 year later, I was like, I want to die. I don't understand to fucking die. Well, I think the reason they decided to do this is because, again, they wanted to leave no stone unturned. Because in case it wasn't obvious that this movie not only is not about like class struggle and the positive, like, hey, we want poor and working people to do better in life. No, it's not about that. It's about erasing any notion that there needs to be that, and then trampling on the fucking carcass, dancing on it, burning it, and fucking painting like the worst borderline Nazi-ish propaganda I've ever fucking seen. So here's the deal. Here's what happens. 1 year later, we're in Jeff and Pam's house. So it worked out. They sold the doll. They got to keep the house. But not only, you immediately notice, even before they said it, I immediately noticed, oh, they renovated it. And then we find out they vacationed in Europe, yada, yada, yada. And they literally say it solved all our problems. Now Christmas just like you Mercers. Though, yes, your house is still much bigger, but you've humbled yourselves because you're coming to our place for the holiday dinner. And that unlikable witch, Mrs. Mercer, she still fucking manages to say, I could not believe they had this line. I could not believe they had this line. The house could have used some remodeling. Like, what?
Is that her that says that?
Yes. Mrs. Mercer says that to Allie Gilbert, like, oh, I'm glad you remodeled your house. It could have used it. Because last time when you were here and you were the poor. No, she doesn't even know about her own yet. Or no, did she?
Well,
does,
it's been a year. It's a year later. She does. I thought she meant her own house could have used it anyway, so it didn't matter that the kid.
I'm pretty sure she meant it at the Jeff and Pam's family.
No,
I'm 99%
that would have been a
sure.
really dick thing to say to a person. Your house needed remodeling.
This movie is the dick movie that would say that. Now, let's just pretend for 1 second. Let's pretend for 1 second that you're right and I'm wrong. Let's pretend for 1 second that
they're trying to be nicer than you realize. They're trying to. It doesn't come across.
Well, hold on.
But they're trying.
No. See, this is the problem because I'm like, you could argue that the interpretation I just said is more damaging, but barely. Because if it's the way you're saying that she's referencing her own house's destruction and just being flippantly like the only takeaway she had from that, it was the house could have used some remodeling. It's still the same fucking smug, condescending bullshit.
For sure.
It's not any better, and a total disrespect to the family.
Totally. But I get what she was getting at. She's trying to say, hey, you guys, there's no hard feelings because my house needed remodeling anyway. I'm not mad at you for ruining my chandelier.
Dana, honestly, the tone of voice you're giving this does not at all hide how horrible the comment is. It's like just sounds horrible. Like straight up. It's not nice. And if you think that's nice, you're fucked in the head. Like that's what I'm trying to say about
I think
this
she's
lady. Trying
to tell them that there's no hard feelings for damaging her house. We're friends now. I'm not mad that you damaged my house. It's fine. That's, I think, what they were getting at, and the writers didn't nail it, but I see where they were trying to go.
I think, and this is really the point I want to conclude on this. Like a lot of things, there's a reason I'm going this ham about this. The reason I'm going this ham about this is because it really, really speaks. It really speaks that anyone thought any of these choices were a good idea, because it really tells you just how little thought was actually put in the way towards this, and what thought there was, which actually arguably might have been a lot of thought. Like, let's say, again, verbatim, that what you just said was the intention. That actually, again, communicates to me exactly what's wrong here, because that was a lot of thought and to undercut the obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Like the obvious is the obvious. And like, if you don't see the obvious, then like you can pull out like any other fucking wig bang excuse for why you would say something. But like, you know what I mean? It's just, okay, let me give you an example, because maybe I'm not making it clear. Like if I said, oh God, there's no good way for me to say this without saying some bad stuff I don't want to say on the air. But like, you know, I was thinking of things, you know, things that, you know, you can, I'll let your imagination do the work. How about that, Dana? And to our audience, right? So it's like, imagine a really racist person, right?
Okay.
In their mind, because they are racist, they believe certain things to be true to the point where they take them for granted. So even when they think they're being, quote, nice to people that are, let's say, Black, the things they will say that they think are nice will demonstrate their racism nevertheless. Do you see what I'm saying?
Sure. Oh, of course.
Like they'll be like, "Oh, it's really good that you actually have a house over your head, huh?"
Let's
like, you
move
know,
it
that
back.
type of thing.
Let's move it back to The Office for one moment.
Yeah.
Michael chooses Stanley to play basketball for him because he assumes he's a good basketball player because he's a Black man. So he's like, why me? Why of course you pick me? He's trying to be nice and saying, I believe you're skilled at something, but because of who he's saying it to and the way he's picking him for the team, it implies racism.
For sure. So yeah, this movie, I mean, really, like I said, it takes this idea. The whole reason I watched this, because this apparent comment that this movie had something to say about class struggle. No, its entire mission is basically to erase the notion and to rebrand it, remodel it, if you will, as something so disturbing and demented that I'm not joking when it says it feels like fascist propaganda. And even that aside, it's the worst movie I've seen this year, quite possibly the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. Like, there's no scorn, and there's not enough scorn in the world that I have for it. Like and it's crazy, because now I'm gonna have to turn our attention back to one of the best movies ever made. That somehow this fucking yielded as its bastard child 31 years later. I just am like, what the fuck? I mean,
well, I definitely don't have that much scorn, but I will not be watching it again. I don't think it's a good movie.
I know it sounds like I'm being crazy hyperbolic, and to some extent I am, but I'm really not. Like, I actually can't remember the last time a movie made me this angry.
I believe that you would burn this movie to the ground if you could.
Oh yeah. I just would, you know what I would do? I wouldn't burn it to the ground. I'd just be like, the writers, who includes even people that I would have thought like were okay. Like, I think one of the writers was Mikey Day, the guy from SNL.
He was.
Yeah. I'm like, he's whatever. I mean, my thoughts on SNL notwithstanding, but like, I'm like, whatever. I'm not like, oh, fuck that guy. But I'd be like, you should be arrested. Unless you can prove in a court of law that all the bad decisions in the movie were not you should be arrested for making this movie.
Well, that's kind of how I feel about what I'm going to say about little Archie. No. Look, Archie, you didn't do the best work, but it wasn't your fault because the grown-ups were telling you what to do. And you just did what they told you to do, right?
No,
but guess what?
I'm sorry. I gotta push back against that too.
No, you can't push back.
I'll tell you what it is.
Be a star.
No, I'm not gonna say that like it's his fault by any stretch of the imagination. But this kid is like, here, MaCaulay Culkin is like a light year away.
Well, you're comparing.
No, but the movie's inviting that comparison, ain't it?
It is inviting it, but it for me, I'm taking it like apples and oranges. They're a different generation, they're a different style of actor.
Maybe they shouldn't have made a movie called Home Alone that like wants to be a new Home Alone.
I definitely think that there's going to be, I mean, a lot of this stems from my love of him, of Jojo Rabbit. He was a delight in that film. And I think that because he can do, that was him.
I know, but see, I think a lot of people are giving it a pass for that.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. He's a young actor. He hasn't honed his own craft yet to a sense. He takes a lot of what the directors and producers are giving to him at that age. Even if you're a seasoned actor, you're still taking what the adults are giving you. So I think with the right adult supervision and the right script, this kid can knock it out of the park. I think he's got what it takes. Do I think it was displayed in this film? No. But I do think that the potential is still
His
there.
Scenes
He's still
where he's supposed to be sad are like, he's like, I mean, he's not acting. He's basically just saying lines. I like, all right, enough with this. We can move on. First thing I got to say before I get any further into this take on Home Alone, we're now talking about the real Home Alone, not the bullshit, is that John Hughes, Chris Columbus, any other producer, people involved in the movie, this is kind of like my death of the author clause.
okay.
My death of the author clause. That's a term people use. Basically, I don't even want to get into because like there's some debate even to its proper usage. But the point is this idea that their intentions, John Hughes, Chris Columbus, their intentions, to my mind, don't necessarily matter, except where it may in fact contribute to the inherent tensions within the text, within the context, and permeating the subtext. And the reason I'm saying that is because the take I'm about to give on Home Alone, while I don't think it'll surprise anyone who's been listening to this podcast and listening to the things that I tend to fixate on, but it's kind of out there compared to like anything else I've read. And I try to read a lot of Home Alone stuff. And that's the whole point of why I read the silly sort of BuzzFeed Home Alone theories corners, because I'm like, that's that. And this is scholarship, baby. All right, let me get, or at least just the one take of a madman on a podcast.
I'll accept either.
The thesis of Home Alone, according to me, is that it's about Christmas. Christmas is contradictory at best and downright sociopathic and violent at worst, as defined by the American experience under capitalism. And it is Christmas that in turn best defines that experience. And Kevin McCalister is the ultimate avatar for this sociopathy. He's the face of an innocent child, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, with his sweaters and corduroys, living a perfect upper middle class suburban existence free of controversy, adversity, and filled with endless consumption and consumerism. But he obsessively watches Angels with Filthy Souls, learns its every line, concluding that outsiders to this existence within these castle walls, you know, from your pizza delivery man to anyone else, are trash to be taken out. And when the criminal underclass comes at his door, he not only elects to defend it himself rather than seek help from the police or the state, though he will ultimately call them to do his final bidding, but these criminals must be punished by him for the mere pleasure of watching them in pain, desperate, trying to scale the staircases up from him up to him, who's sitting pretty at the top, laughing down at them. And in the end, Kevin not only will be rewarded with his family back, but a bounty of Christmas gifts to open. More for me, none for thee. And one other thing I'll say before I start to unpack what I mean there, because I know that was a lot of crazy shit. In terms of even that rewarded with his family back part, should be noted that the sentimentality of that like very happy ending at the end of Home Alone, the first film, and the entirety of the Mr. Marley stuff that kind of encapsulates that, were not part of John Hughes' original conception. So this is what I mean about saying, like, I will reference what Hughes or Columbus may have said or intended or did, if in so much it supports the ideas that I'm saying the film has here regardless, right? So this is an example. So they, that wasn't part of it. That was something that was added later, mostly at Christopher Columbus's, behest, because he was like, oh, well, I think the film needs more of this like holiday uplift, more of this spirit. There should be more of a moralism, more of a lesson. So we introduced this Mr. Marley character, etc. And ultimately, my whole thought about it is that almost like it's both, you could say it's an exception to the rule, but it's the exception that defines the rule itself, because what it provides is this sort of whitewash kind of liberalism over the whole thing. It's like, help the poor man, check. Christmas is about family goodwill, not excessive consumerism, check. Student athletes, you know, it's like that whole thing, that South Park joke where they're talking about the NCAA and, oh, you treat your athletes like slaves. It's like, oh, right. Student athletes. Yes, of course. That's what we call them. It's like this idea of like, well, you know, it's a Christmas movie. It's about family and goodwill. It's a nice story. Don't think too much about it. And I'm here to tell you, let's think about it, because as I pointed out with the Kevin is Jigsaw theories out there, people have thought about it. Whether they've thought about it a lot or not, people have thought about it. The fact that so much of the movie is devoted to some of the violence that it's devoted to, the fact that Kevin's whole thing is he's a kid filled with anger and rage who watches these movies like Angels with Filthy Souls, learns all their lines, all that stuff is a part of the text of the film. It's very much there. It takes up a massive amount of screen time. It's kind of a defining characteristic of the character. So I don't think you can get around it. You might try to argue that it's not the point, and then I'm extrapolating too much from that, but I'll get to why I disagree. And I'll even give a good reading of why I think the other argument has its merits and maybe even why they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Also point out that one other little notable thing about the film that it seems to be suggesting is that, because remember in the original film, they're going to Paris, and it's like, hey, by the end of the film, you're really definitely supposed to think Christmas belongs to America, not France, meaning Christmas belongs to us, our consumer-driven ways, not the ideologically and supposedly lefty kind of, i.e., like, pussified France. All right, Christmas is for us. It's American. Okay, so I think the only way to really kind of unpack what I'm talking about with Christmas is to like kind of understand Christmas in like a historical kind of framework where
I'll just toss it in there real quick. Angela from The Office also believes you shouldn't talk about nudity or France at Christmas. So
is that a line in that show?
She said it's Christmas and you're talking about nudity and France.
Angela is definitely spot a character. On. No, well, not only spot on, but definitely a character that I would believe would watch Home Alone and more or less get it the exact way I'm pitching.
More or less exactly understand
so
what
totally,
you're
totally,
yep.
totally. She watches it and I'm like, yes.
Yep, I knew it. France.
I knew it. Just fucking step on that nail. Like, ugh. Okay, so there's a great book that I got my parents years ago. It's like a really cool book. I'm actually looking forward to going home so I can take a look at it again. It's called Mid-Century Christmas. And it's kind of like a historical, like photo coffee table book and with a lot of artwork. But what it really encapsulates, and there's a specific movie I'm going to mention that I think also really encapsulates this, like Christmas as we think of it comes from our department store culture that kind of starts around, the turn of the century into the 1920s, then the 30s and the 40s, up and through all now the radio and then magazine and TV advertising, like the whole Mad Men thing. I think of Mad Men, I cannot extract. Mad Men has everything to do with this, right? Like, and so this idea of shopping, department stores, and white picket fence suburbs, right? The movie I was mentioning that I think perfectly shows this, it's literally the text of the movie, is have you ever seen the film Carol with Cate Blanchett?
Oh, I did not see that.
Great film.
I don't think I did.
I recommend you watch it. Maybe I'll be talking about it next week. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but the basic plot of the movie is that Carol, played by Cate Blanchett, is a 1950s housewife who's married to Kyle Chandler, makes a lot of money, and like exactly what I'm describing, she travels in from the suburbs into New York City to do her department store Christmas shopping. And she meets the girl behind the counter who's wearing her little elf hat, and it's Rooney Mara. And she awakens her lesbian lusts for Rooney Mara. And and then Kyle Chandler finds out that his wife's sleeping with another woman, that type of thing. Whatever. Yes, I'm not going to spoil any more of it, but that's basically the plot. It's a Todd Haynes film, and Todd Haynes is one of the best filmmakers, certainly of like LGBTQ stories. And Carol's an amazing film, but one of the things that stands out to me is Carol, to me, is absolutely a Christmas movie, and it perfectly encapsulates this vibe I'm talking about. And it's something also, even though this doesn't touch Christmas or the winter time at all, like there is this mid-century department store culture, because we have your wives in the fur going to buy stuff. Because what do we think of even Santa? Where do you meet Santa? You go take pictures with him at the department store. That's where all this comes from. All the advertising. This is what you need this holiday. This is what you need this holiday. This is what you need this holiday. Holiday season starts earlier and earlier and earlier. It's all about shopping. It's all about buying. It's all about consuming. Buy, 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 buy. Santa Claus is literally the mascot of buy, 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 buy. And even the myth of Santa Claus, the way it teaches to children, is basically parents think they're teaching it to their children to have fun with the kids. You're getting fucking played. You've been taught to teach that to your kids to create a guilt cycle so you feel fucking guilty when you don't buy a lot of presents. It's because they'll stop believing in Santa Claus and you ruin their childhood. Oh, these dumb fucks. Okay. Anyway, they're not really dumb. Let me be very clear about this. People have no choice. This is the culture they grew up in. It's the culture I grew up in. I was surrounded by this stuff. That's why this book speaks to me. And like, it made me connect with like, cause it's all through the past. I'm like, wow, my parents grew up with this stuff. Everyone grew up with this stuff. This 100%. Creates this cycle of like, oh my God. Like, I think one of the biggest motivations for people is like, it's even me right now today. I was like all last week, I was like kind of stressing because I was like, shit, man, I got to make sure I don't spend too much so I can afford to buy the Christmas gifts I want to get for people so they don't think I'm like a loser or cheap or something.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know,
it's a lot of pressure. I actually read this article that it's killing women because we already have the bulk of the responsibilities in family life, cooking and cleaning and whatnot. And then all of the magic of the holidays tends to fall on mom, making cookies, doing the wrapping, doing all the stuff. Dads don't tend to be as involved culturally.
Nope.
So it's like mom has all this pressure for like 6 weeks on top of everything else. Women at Christmas get depressed
right now, man. My mom gets so depressed. My mom on Christmas Eve night is a mess. She is like totally collapses into a total depression and nihilism every Christmas Eve. I'm looking forward to it this year. It'll happen again this year. It happens every year. Like yeah, it's fucked, but that's
it's a lot. You know what? I think I'm very lucky. My mom does certain things, but she also, as a teacher, like knew when to stop because she knew that she could go on forever doing stuff, doing gifts for all the kids and doing stuff. Like everybody gets something and it's something easy. And the most magical thing that she ever did for me that I will always carry on and do for my kids if I have one day is the footprints on the floor. So you know that Santa was there. Yeah. It's easy, cheap, and it makes kids believe in magic for a couple more years until they figure out they can Google things. It's going to be fun, but those little things, it's like you have to like draw a line.
I'm anti Claus. I'm anti Claus. Like I grew up loving Santa Claus. I'm sure I'm going to talk about this a lot next week with some of the movies I want to talk about, but like, yeah, I'm pretty I'm pretty fucking anti Santa Claus, and not even just for the reasons I mentioned earlier. But here's the thing. So, like I said, you get this Mad Men advertising, like Santa's got a brand new bag. All the Christmas songs, they were created to play in department stores while you shopped, constantly reminding you, don't forget, it's Christmas, it's Christmas, it's Christmas, buy, 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 buy. So even as the decades go on, right, when it's Christmas time, come Christmas time, I think what you just said about the mothers speaks to this as well. It's always 1955. It's always 1955 this time of year for everybody because nothing's changed. If you think you're outside of the traditional society, you're not come 1950. You're not come this time of year. You're back in 1955, and you better be fucking
right.
It
kind of is. I find myself doing it. I find myself doing it as well, and I find myself doing it at work because I want to make sure work is magical, and I want to make sure everyone at work feels appreciated as well as in personal life. Yeah. So it's another thing with professional women nowadays. You've got coworkers that everyone gives gifts to and do bake-off cookie competitions with and all of those things. But it does feel like it falls more on Mrs. McCalister. Everything's her fault, right?
Oh yeah. Well, hold on. So here's the thing. Home Alone not made in 1955, made in 1990, which means everything about it culturally was from what preceded it, meaning to the 1980s. So to understand Home Alone, we also now have to talk about the 1980s. So a lot about the 1980s, because that 1980s is also when John Hughes in his entire career up until that point, the bulk of it, most of what people, praise happened, right? So 80s, obviously, and when this Home Alone made in 1990, the president is the successor to Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush. So most of the 80s from 80 to 89, you have Ronald Reagan in the office, and Reagan, I'm not going to get too bogged down to this, but it's important context to understand where Hughes and his work kind of fits in culturally. Is like the culture kind of comes first from the sort of situation that America's in more broadly, right? So Reagan kind of represents the rise of neoconservative and neoliberal politics in America, meaning like, hey, we have this sort of attention and focus on empire, and we have this attention and focus on global trade and kind of removing the barriers that which include unions and other protections for workers. And Ronald Reagan's like one of his big kind of cultural touchstones is this shining city on a hill thing, right? And the other implication of his politics is like this idea of the trickle down economics, which is in a weird fucking roundabout way. The Home Alone, that Home Sweet Home Alone is kind of like doing that with it's like, oh, don't worry, like our son will get the doll for you. And then after he eats, he'll pass on the scraps to you guys. And then you guys can make do with that. And there'll be the rich people will be eating so rich that they'll have so much scraps that the scraps will feed everybody, basically is the idea. So, obviously years later, when you get Donald Trump, his slogan is "Make America Great Again." But I think some people know about this by now. But like, "Make America Great Again" was a slogan used by Reagan's campaign as well. And the idea was this idea of this silent majority, and the idea was like America needs to get back to this white picket fence suburban vision and get away from the sort of urban and distressing vision of the 70s and 60s. Exactly. We've talked about this a lot when we talked about David Lynch's work. It's all been an illusion. Idea. It's all been an idea, but the idea holds a lot of power and weight. And part of why is because of what we're talking about with the advertising and with Christmas and with all these different things, right? Because like I said, come December, it's always 1955.
Projecting nuclear family started around this time as well. The ideal of having an older boy and a younger girl. There's 4 of you. You're perfect.
Because that's what you see on all the ads. Or said, look at little Jimmy for Christmas this holiday season. Get him a gun and get little Mindy a dress and a hairbrush. Like, it's like over and over and over again, right? But the point with the silent majority, like what their politics allegedly were about, was like, we're anti-urban, which means we're anti-drug / anti-crime, which means we're really anti-racial minority, which really means we're anti-poor, period. And this fetishization of the 1950s comes directly as a correspondence to that. And this is ironic because the actual economic realities of the 50s were just defined by the sort of Keynesian economics that came out from FDR all the way through to the war. And even the Republican successors in the 50s, like Dwight Eisenhower, they didn't really change any of that. None of that stuff started to really roll back until, the second half of the 60s and basically the Nixon era. And even Nixon, compared to Reagan, was pretty protective of government spending and programs and things like that, right? So the cultural impact of all this move against that stuff, and I could go on for days about it, so I won't. But the cultural impact, and I don't know if you're familiar with this show. I was actually rewatching clips from it not that long ago. But Family Ties with Michael J. Fox. He plays his character, Alex P. Keaton. Do you know what I'm talking about? This is the show from the 80s. It's like the biggest sitcom of the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Family Ties, of course.
Family Ties. Right. So the whole point of Family, well, not the whole point, but, well, I'd argue it's the whole point. But one of the things about Family Ties, specifically Alex P. Keaton being the most popular character from the show and what defined the show, is this idea of like, oh, we're done with the 70s and 60s. The 80s is all about being Reagan is cool and being a conservative is cool and trickle down economics is cool and loving the 1950s when America was great, making America great again like the 1950s is what's cool and in. Now, all that is to say that John Hughes and his career are coexisting alongside these things. So John Hughes gets his start in the National Lampoon magazine, which I don't think I need to explain to you what that is. Like, you're old enough to know. Right?
Yeah. National Lampoon.
So he gets to start National Lampoon. So in other words, he gets to start writing dirty comedy jokes. And his earliest movies that he worked on from National Lampoon's, I think, what was the first one? I think it was like Back from Summer or something. But like eventually National Lampoon's Vacation, right? It's like we're putting in the dirty jokes, but in the case of Vacation is also where you start to get the family-ish stuff and the younger characters, because you got Anthony Michael Hall as the young kid and stuff, right? Now, John Hughes eventually breaks out with his directorial debut in the film he also wrote, 16 Candles. We'll talk about 16 Candles sometime. It's an interesting movie to talk about.
I did not realize he wrote that.
Yeah, that's a John Hughes movie. That's the John Hughes movie. That's the start of it. That if the movie has Molly Ringwald, it probably is a John Hughes movie. So It's rule of thumb. So double points and Anthony Michael Hall's in it. Yes.
He directed it, right? So
yes.
I didn't realize he directed and wrote. I thought he just
no. Okay, that's fair because there's like a mixture depending on what movie you're talking about. Yeah. But no, he wrote and directed that. And that kind of began the John Hughes as the auteur of teen movies kind of thing that followed, right? And what you'll notice about all these films and what draws me to them to this day, and something related to what we're getting to, this is why I'm getting this, because this is something that is at the DNA of Home Alone, is this idea of the setting. All these movies are set in the Chicago suburbs, and they make this Chicago suburbs, whether it was like this or not. I mean, in some ways it's definitely like this because they're shooting in the real places, and at least for some of it, right? The exteriors, this paradise of exactly the white picket fence vision that we're talking about, that Reagan and all these people are trying to call towards. It's this suburban paradise. And it has this particular kind of fetish towards the upper middle class. And you see this, even in the cases, you definitely see this in Candles and Ferris Bueller specifically, right? Where it's treated very heroically. But even in the examples where there's more of you could say a class consciousness or a conflict, like Breakfast Club or Pretty in Pinks, right? Even there, it's still almost like, yeah, we might say some of these individual characters are problematic or they bully or whatever, or that we should care about fucking Judd Hirsch's character too. But it's still like, hey man, but dude, Emilio Estevez and Molly Ringwald are dope, and I want to be them. You know what I mean? It's like there's this whole kind of thing. So interesting. The movie that directly leads to Home Alone is Uncle Buck. Have you seen Uncle Buck, the John Candy film? It's written directed by John Hughes.
I don't think that I have, but it sounds really familiar. MaCaulay
Culkin's in it, even younger than he is in Home Alone. And he's like a really little kid in this. And it's Uncle Buck is the Uncle Buck. He moves into his brother's house, which is, to my point, this really fucking nice house in the Chicago suburbs, right? With its very particular milieu, which I'm going to talk about. And he's taking care of the kids, and the kids are kind of bratty and spoiled. And so there's the tension between John Candy, who's kind of and this is why I bring it up. It's an interesting dynamic because John Candy represents a more sort of rough around the edges, blue collar, working class kind of Chicago guy. And they're the suburb kids. So it's that's the kind of thing. But I think it's all that John Candy, Chicago stuff is subsumed by the total, at least from my perspective and why I'm branding it Home Alone, other than the fact that, yes, directly the reason Uncle Buck leads to Home Alone is it's the reason MaCaulay Culkin is cast in that part, right? They're they wrote it for MaCaulay Culkin. They're MaCaulay Culkin's the kid, right? But it's this milieu, and this is where I really gets kind of personal for me. So growing up, the house I lived in, because I did live a pretty good posh life, if I'm being honest. That's kind of the whole point, is that I know this from the inside. And specifically because I'm coming up in the 90s, the houses, a lot of the stuff is left over from the 80s or whatever. The 90s milieu at that time wasn't that different. Every house, including the houses literally right next to me, look exactly like the McCalister's house, both outside and in. So when I watch this movie, it's I'm not only looking into my memories of the childhood from the perspective of watching this movie, I'm looking into my childhood, interiors and spaces I lived in, inhabited in. One of the things you'll notice right away is, because you don't see it in any house today, is wallpaper. Every fucking room is some crazy wall. Yeah. And
yeah, that's true. There is some really cool wallpapers. Yeah.
I remember everyone's house, including my own, had all this crazy wallpaper in every room. And then over the years, we removed all that. So I remember early on, this family that used to live next door, and this house that I'm talking about that looks exactly like the Home Alone house. I used to go in there and it'd be like their house was like a fucking maze because it was so big with all these rooms, but every room had some crazy wallpaper. And I was like, what is this? And you mentioned Buzz's bedroom. Buzz's bedroom is a treasure trove of early 90s kids, particularly sport culture, particular Chicago sport culture, right? And what I'm talking about is all the Bulls and the Bulls mania specifically. But like you said, he's got his Ice-T poster. He's got his Michael Jordan cutout. He's got his little trash shoot basketball rim. He's got all this shit. He's got the wallpaper with the baseball guys. Well, his room also looked exactly like that, except it was more Knicks than Bulls. My room and my cousin's room and my my brother's room, all ours look exactly like this. So like, I'm just like looking at myself. So, and I think one of the reasons I really relate to Home Alone in particular is because I really do relate to Kevin, not because I'm the youngest, I'm actually the oldest in my house, but nevertheless, we're kind of our own little black sheeps. And I like Kevin. This is why I know where Kevin's coming from, as fucked as I'm going to make it sound. Supervillain fantasies. I grew up obsessed with being a supervillain. I just wanted to be a supervillain. I wanted to punish all the dummies out there and like get back at people and all this stuff. And it wasn't like angry in that way. Like, it wasn't like I was violent necessarily towards other people, but it was just like this idea of like the villains are smarter than the heroes, so the whole Kevin, because what I'm really going to get into is the idea that Kevin is kind of like, even before the sort of Sopranos, Breaking Bad, modern anti-hero TV, Kevin McCalister is the original OG fucking I'm done when I say we're done, Walter White fucking anti-hero hero, right? Like, that's what he is. He's just fucking, he absolutely mows down these guys at the end, just like you would expect in one of those shows, and is like completely committed to his like sort of villainy. And the way Home Alone 2 is, I think, only proves this point, because the Kevin in Home Alone 2 is a more advanced type of malicious and a more advanced type of like conniving, sneaky little bastard. And like, he's proud of it too, mind you. So he didn't learn anything from the first movie other than how awesome it is to like fucking torture other people and to make his parents stressed out and to just generally scam people. Like, like whatever. So then we move on to the 1990s. Now, obviously, Home Alone comes out in 1990, so it doesn't really have any comment on the 90s. They'll come, except maybe the first couple months. We're still, years before Bill Clinton taking office. But, in the H.W. Bush era, you get the beginnings, and what will become one of the defining political movements of the 90s in that era is this idea of tough on crime, right? Culminating in the 94 crime bill, et cetera. But like, tough on crime gets its start in the 80s. It gets its start in this war on drugs ethos that Reagan kind of really brought to the front. I mean, Nixon was the one who coined that term, but you get what I'm getting at. And we have what's not only a racial, as is often stated, but a class war. It's a class war on the impoverished. That's what this tough on crime shit is. It's a way of saying, how are we going to control the impoverished of our urban side? How are we going to make it so that we can gentrify, put in more expensive real estate? We're going to create broken windows policing. We're going to create tougher drug laws. We're basically going to move all the people that we don't like and put them into the prison system, mass incarceration. And to make this agenda happen and to feed it, we have a constant media cycle that reinforces it to us. And that's what really takes hold in the ethos of the 90s and where it ties into Home Alone, because that's what I'm saying, that not that Home Alone caused what happened after, but Home Alone is a way connected to the same threads that will let this launch if it, and it's already ongoing, right? And it will tie into the ongoing impact of Home Alone on the subconscious of the American society, right? So what I'm talking about is this idea of home invasion. The media tells you, there might be a prowler out. There might be someone, OJ killed somebody, or someone, has a knife out there. There's danger at every corner. Be afraid of your neighbor. Buy and invest in home security, McCalister Home Security. You need that. Children are constantly in danger. You need to be worried about your children. Protect your kids. There's pedophiles everywhere. There's satanic rituals in the elementary schools. We need to make sure that our children are safe. And you better have a gun. The NRA. You better have a gun. Guns. You need it. Self-defense. What happens if an intruder breaks in your home? Fucking shoot him in the fucking face. You better make sure you shoot him. Stand your fucking ground. Shoot. You better be scared out of your fucking mind all of the damn time of someone breaking into your home that you might need to do violence on. Violence, buy gun, buy, security. Okay. And this is basically the argument that Michael Moore was making when he made Bowling for Columbine, which is, and it's not the violence in the video games. It's not even the amount of guns we have or gun culture in terms of like actual hunting and sporting and collecting culture. It's gun culture as in the culture of America as being obsessed with violence being done to them, the culture of fear that derive the fear because it's commercialized fear. It's fear for the sake of profits. The media profits from making you afraid because it makes you more glued to your TV, more likely to listen to it. And obviously the manufacturers of guns, the manufacturers of security systems, the manufacturers of consumer goods in general, whether it's like, you ever see these commercials with the fucking apocalypse shit with like, hey, you need to make sure you have your tank for your bunker and all this bullshit, right? Be afraid. Now that ethos, when you're coming in from, whether you're talking your Bill Clintons or your Newt Gingriches, right? And the 90s is also where guys like Limbaugh take off on the conservative radio scene. And the idea of conservative media personality is something I also want to point out as like an evolving evolution in America through this time before, during, and after Home Alone and the connection there. Because remember, there's this obsession with MaCaulay Culkin. There's obsession with this blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, this boy who's willing to take a stand and shoot people or with a BB gun, but nevertheless, right, is the conservative wonderkind. And, we think of today, like where Ben Shapiro started or Steven Crowder even started. It's this idea of conservatives being obsessed with these little kids, these little kid prophets. It goes back to the little kid preachers and the evangelical movements and stuff. It's like this, oh my God, look at the kids. The kids are so innocent. The kids are so important. We got to indoctrinate the kids. Look at this ultimate kid. He's the ultimate do-gooder kid. He's fully absorbed our ideology and he's out there proselytizing it, not to the other kids, but to the gullible fucking senior citizens who will fucking go along with what he's saying, right? So this conservative wonderkind environment, I think, has absolutely everything to do with the holding pressure of a Kevin McCalister and what Kevin McCalister hypothetically represents. It's this idea of look to the children. They have the answers, which is inherently an infantilizing way of looking at things because it implies that an essentialism, a mythology, a just simplified, like, oh, this is who's the good guys, this is who the bad guys are, mentality that is devoid and against any further nuance or complexity, right, is something we should aspire to rather than grow out of. And this is fundamental to perpetuating the general conservative myths, right? Anyway, the film We Need to Talk About Kevin. I mentioned this to you before. Do you remember this?
About Kevin?
There's a movie called We Need to Talk About Kevin. I think I mentioned this before to you, like when I referenced some.
You did mention it. I didn't recall that it was about this Kevin.
No, it's not. But the title to me is like a dead signifier that there's like a self-awareness about this connection. Because, and also there's the MaCaulay Culkin film, The Good Son. Did you ever see that?
The Good Son? Yeah.
Okay. So let me start there. So The Good Son is the story of MaCaulay Culkin, and basically has this bad seed, this evil kid who's like a serial killer in the making or some shit, who like tries to murder his own sister and weird fucked up shit like that. Right. So that's all there. And I think that when it really comes down to it, when I bring in We Need to Talk About Kevin, what I'm really talking about is this kind of idea that Kevin, the core of the film is Kevin's relationship to his mother. And if you've seen We Need to Talk About Kevin, you'll know that's what We Need to Talk About Kevin is about. It's about a mom played by Tilda Swinton, who's realizing that her son has these violent tendencies and might be the serial killer. And like, she's trying to connect with her son, but unlike, I would say, Mr. McCalister, and it's a different tone of movie for sure. There's like this darkness within her where she's not really able to connect with him. And there's this realization that what he is because of her, and she has to just kind of accept that. And it has a very fucked up dark ending, which I think maybe some people might see coming, but I don't want to say. Ezra Miller plays Kevin. He's a bit younger. His son, he's like, 15, 16 years old, I think is when he made this movie, or maybe he's probably like 20, but looks more like 15, 16 years old. Anyway. So the role of the mother, or the mother as being the redemption for a budding young sociopath like Kevin, is why the movie fucking works. Because really, and this is my first sort of appendice to my thesis, but it's very much important point, so maybe it's not really appendix. Anyway, is this idea of the Ballad of Mrs. McCalister. That's what this story really to me is. And it's really important because, I don't want people to think I just think of Home Alone as this dark, twisted movie. It is that, but the counterbalance to that, but is also very tied into what's ultimately so dark about it, is the story of Mrs. McCalister. And again, why I'm so insulted by this new Home Alone movie, which totally butchers that character, right? It's the hope and love of this mother who will do anything to get back to her son, which, if you're following along with what I'm saying, the son represents, it's this mother who will do anything to save America's soul. Because Kevin is the avatar for America's soul here. And she is kind of this proper co-protagonist to Kevin. She is given a real story, a real arc, a real sequence of scenes to follow her story along through. And she has sincere and deep motivations. She goes to the ringer, but keeps on coming, right? She earns that emotional reunion at the end, right? It's actually earned, right? So side note here is about John Candy, who I mentioned before, he playing this guy, Gus Polinski, who she meets. So Gus Polinski, as he introduced her, Gus Polinski, polka king of the Midwest and the Kenosha Kickers, which, Kenosha didn't have that connotation it does now. Gus Polinski, polka king of the Midwest and the Kenosha Kickers, which obviously is an unfortunate association today. Kenosha, they had no idea. That's something I'm not trying to make a connection to, just a coincidence. But yeah, so, Mrs. McCalister is willing to take a ride with essentially the representatives in the film of the white ethnic working class, white ethnic as in, Eastern European, Polish, Slavic, working class of the Midwest. And yeah, it's the Midwest. So specifically around Chicago, and they're clearly Chicago guys. There's this sense of the Polish diaspora there. That's what you're getting. And, Miss Candy straight up asked her, you don't mind going with some polka bums? It's like, and that's when Mrs. McCalister gives her biggest smile of genuine joy, gratitude, and relief. So again, Mrs. McCalister, even though she is all the signifiers with her fur coats and her earrings and all this stuff, and she's even giving away Rolexes to try to get back in her bougie ways, but she's willing to shed all that to get back to Kevin. That's what I mean about her being this counter force to save America's soul. It's like, we could be saved. We could shed all that shit and save ourselves. And we don't have to separate ourselves from these other classes. We don't have to fear them. Kevin's afraid of the robbers. Mrs. McCalister's not afraid of the polka candies, right? And I think we really do need to point out the sort of strange irony, though, that Candy himself, I mentioned what happened with Daniel Stern, but there's an ongoing thing if you look into Home Alone about people being underpaid, so it's not a good production really, right? So John Candy shot his scenes, all of his scenes, the entire Polka King arc in one single day, a 23-hour shoot day. So more than double the length of a normal legal shoot day, or basically double. Because you can do 12, but he did all that for $414. This is John Candy, movie star at this point. Now, he did this as a favor to John Hughes, but nevertheless, I don't care. I'm not saying he needed the money. I'm not saying any of that. It's just, given the amount of overtime work he's doing and all this stuff, it's a bad precedent. It shows you the sort of lack of forethought to this stuff. Because presumably other people had to be in all these scenes, all the other polka guys and whatnot. It's not fair. So the one consolation, if you will, that Candy had was that he was allowed to improvise all his lines, which I think helps the sort of authenticity. And if you look really closely at the scenes, there is a sort of unpredictability, kind of spinning the tail or yarn kind of thing, but it makes it good. It makes it authentic. I really he's talking about, I never lost my kids. No. I did leave one at a funeral parlor once, that type of thing. But yeah, I don't think I can say much more about Mrs. McCalister without pointing out, some would say the obvious, some would say beside the point, but as I'm going to get to, it's very much the point. And about Mrs. McCalister's enduring moment in my psyche, but probably a lot of psyches, and this sort of American connection there is, well, the woman I'm about to mention is definitely Canadian, but Catherine O'Hara being this particularly in this role with the red hair and all that is like very beautiful and radiant woman, and the love that she embodies for Kevin with that beauty is like all tied together, right? In the psychology, I mean, it's embarrassing, but like for me, she was like one of the original kind of like for MILFs, if you will, of just like, and it kind of embodies everything kind of weird in that concept, and psychosexual is like this sort of identification with a mother or a replacement mother, or identifying with being a son, all these different things that are kind of twisted up in that ball there. And of course, that twistingness is very much to the point of what I am saying about Kevin. We need to talk about Kevin, the serial killer, the Oedipus complex. And if you're really taking the Oedipus complex, who does Kevin want to kill first? Mr. McCalister. Now, I'm not going to say too much about that because it's really just a hypothetical idea. We don't see any real violence. I mean, I mentioned that whole joke about how Mr. McCalister hates his son. That's silly. But, and Kevin's like, I wish for no family. It's almost like you'd be saying, I wish for no family but you, Mom, even though he's directing it at her. It's like, I'll kill Dad and replace him. Like, this is all part of that notion. But I don't think we can say too much more about Mr. or Mrs. Callister without giving some class notes here because, well, first off, great. As I mentioned, on a podcast when we were talking about After Hours months ago, Peter McCalister, played by John Hurd, along with Kate McCalister, Mrs. McCalister, played by Catherine O'Hara. This is a reunion of those two actors who appear together in Scorsese's After Hours in a coincidental kind of way, right? So they're both great. They look great together. They feel like a couple. They are both wearing an obscene amount of Burberry and toggle coats and furs, and just really setting up this idea of this first class indulgence down to them sitting literally in first class. And like, she's like, oh, are we jerks for doing that? And Mr. McCalister, and of course, Peter being so flippant about it, it's just like, yeah, kids are having a great time. I don't know. When I was a kid, I couldn't afford stuff like this. I didn't know any better, and, at this point, they don't even realize Kevin's gone. So it's like this ultimately neglectful of the children type of thing. They're just too caught up in the indulgence of their privilege to realize their kids are gone, right? Or one kid is gone, but hypothetically just the kids at all, right? And who's their antithesis? That's obviously the film. The antithesis to prove the thesis would be Frank, Uncle Frank. And Uncle Frank and his whole branch of the family, as they're clearly coded and designed, represent this alternative, this poorer, i.e. lower middle class representative. They're petty and cheap, right? The sin. Being petty and being cheap is a sin. Sins against the high level consumer driven suburban American dream that the other branch of the McCalisters and that Christmas and that Home Alone in general is meant to idolize and represent, right? So that's why Uncle Frank is kind of a villain. He is the villain as far as the messaging of the film is concerned. It's like, what a cheap piece of shit. He needs to go out instead of buying his family a bunch of lavish gifts like a good American would. He's out there sneaking silverware out of first class and not paying for the pizza, right? It's like that. And it's like, look what you did, you little jerk. That sort of venom he has towards Kevin is almost just like a venom that he can like pick on, the bright blue-eyed avatar for our souls, right? Now, moving into one last thing before I move on to this, I just want to say a note that it's interesting. Another interesting casting trivia is that Uncle Frank was originally offered to Kelsey Grammer, who at the time would have been on Cheers, and you see how that goes, right? So it makes sense with ultimately the way they went. And Uncle Frank, iconic character, iconic delivery. In the 2000s, and obviously now we're 10 years removed from Home Alone, but we've also had 10 years of Home Alone's impact and 10 years of a more American history and American culture that are interwoven into the same sort of tapestry that Home Alone itself is woven from and woven back into. So what happens in the 2000s? The invention of torture porn. And even the concept of torture porn, which as I'll define with like films like the Saw series or Hostel, it's horror films, basically all about watching victims, teens, whatever, immigrants, whatever, get tortured or have to endure torture. And the way they ultimately can escape, if any of them do, will be by enduring this torture or outsmarting the torturer. But it's like a grind, and most of them will not outsmart them. That's the whole premise, right? Now, some have said that this torture porn is a direct reaction. I think they're right about this to some extent. Politics and context of the time, which is the Iraq War, the Bush administration, W. Bush administration, the Dick Cheney administration. This idea of we're out there and we are a global torture regime and empire who takes people with no evidence, puts them in Gitmo or Abu Ghraib and all, etc., and proceeds to torture them for no other reason, really, than to strike fear into the rest of the world, right? Because it doesn't yield reliable information. No one really thinks it does. It's just a mere matter of how do we establish ourselves as the most vicious and to be feared people in the world so that we can wield absolute power. And so we can have these so-called terrorists cowering at us if possible, even though we know that's also unrealistic. And so if torture porn is that, then perhaps other things related to that are also torture porn. And I think one of the most obvious cultural sensations of the 2000s is the TV show 24 with Keith Sutherland. And it's all about the torture, baby. It's like, how do we make sure that torture guys are really cool? And it's like, hey, I need to get that information. I need to stop that fucking bomb. So I'm going to fucking pull out your goddamn toenails. All right. If it gets the job done, it gets the job done, baby. So in that cases, we're talking about terrorists or would-be terrorists. In the case of Home Alone, because this is why I bring this up, Home Alone was just 10 years ahead of the curve, baby. Just 10 years ahead of the curve. And Home Alone is the sort of PG torture porn that will graduate up into the R-rated or TV-14 in the case of 24 elevation of that, right? So the subjects here, rather than being terrorists, are the wet bandits, Harry and Marv. And look, quite simply, they're portrayed, even though with a lot of charisma and fun, as bad men who deserve pain and to be punished with impunity. And it's all because they are in your house. Stand your fucking ground. You are in my house. I have the right to do whatever I want to stand my ground, right? So by making the violence and the reaction to it by Harry and Marv cartoonishly slapstick and endlessly inventive and therefore fun to watch, it acts as a release to these urges in the audience, into our zeitgeist. It's a torture safe space. And so the fact that this safe space precedes the eventual modern torture porn in the torture regime of America just tells you that, like, ooh, these lusts have been in a long time. And of course they have. You know, obviously torture has been a part of every human society for a long time, and torture as entertainment certainly has. You know, when you talk about the galleys, the lynchings, the floggings in the public square, the fucking guillotines, all the above. I mean, those are deaths, so you can say they're not torture in the sense of keeping someone alive, but it's all part of the same sort of violent, pain-induced spectacle, right? So there's something within us that reacts to this, and there's studies and science on it, but I'm not going to get into that. We just can kind of just accept it as the way it is. And a film like Home Alone is our earliest PG safe space for those urges. Today, now skipping ahead another 20 years, where we get to the 2020s, right? The reality that we live in now, and it's one of the reasons that this Home Sweet Home Alone is so fucking disgusting, is Christmas more than ever and more over these 31 years since Home Alone came out has become more and more of a kind of, you know, elites, if you will, only indulgence, at least at the full extent as advertised. Obviously, everyone's kind of doing their Christmas thing, but the version you see on TV, the version of the ads is more and more of like an exclusive group that can actually live out these fantasies. Less and less people have that white picket fence suburb if they even want it. And the rest of us, therefore, who can't, are on the outside, forever stuck on the outside of the commercials, are just beaten over and over and over again in the head how bad and how ashamed we should feel for not being able to provide the Christmas we see on TV and every ad in most holiday movies, and in particular Home Alone, to our families. So on the one hand, this is what Home Sweet Home Alone is trying to depict or make use of, but can't help itself by neutering its would-be class critique by pushing a truly awful kid on us. And look, as I'm kind of getting to, Kevin is awful, but in a way that's engrossing. He's in the great tradition of a violent anti-hero, right? That's what I'm saying about the Walter White stuff or the Tony Soprano stuff. Like, whereas Max is dumb, one-dimensional, unfunny, lacking in any internal conflict, no repressed urges, any adversity. He has no siblings, cousins, uncles bullying him and everything. We all talked about that. And most of all, he's lacking just any charisma of any kind. He's not MaCaulay Culkin. No, sorry, Archie Yates. Sorry, you're just not. And part of even why I think he has no charisma, it's not just the performance difference. It's what's part of that. It's like, what's the text that MaCaulay Culkin is playing? And that is what I've always been responding to, the perversity. Kevin McCalister is full of perversity. Max has no perversity. He's just a boring, sorry to say, soy-faced dummy kid who creates all his own problems. Now, the Wet Bandits, where they fit into this, the Wet Bandits exist as reflections of the criminal underclass as a counterculture, and a counterculture with professionals. The Wet Bandits are pros. This is what they do for a living. They go and they rob houses. They have their own band. They have their own whatever, right? This is what they do. They're at work. Harry and Marv are at work casing these houses. And they are professionals who know that they are what they're getting into. They are ultimately riddled with a false confidence, which is what makes them vulnerable. They're full of this gusto and false confidence. Like, this kid is just a stupid little kid, so he can't stop us. And of course he does, right? So all of that helps contribute to this like dynamic that makes them both likable, but also perfectly fine to see battered and punished as far as you're concerned. And it's because obviously this violence is cartoony. While they are cartoon villains ultimately, what's interesting about them is the way Pesci and Stern play them very sincerely. Like, Pesci's bringing his expert sort of street energy, and Stern has his laid back and dim-witted charm too. And they are cartoon villains met with cartoonish violence. It's an old hat, but being this tried and true thing, going back to Looney Tunes and all that stuff, it's entirely unpretentious. And that's why it works. Contrast that with Home Sweet Home Alone, where Jeff and Pam are everything but all of that. And despite the movie suggesting them to be sympathetic and our main protagonist over Max, they're left to the whims of that story and its need to remake the tropes of Home Alone. So again, they're put through the same sort of torture, battery, and bullshit, even though the movie tries to paint them as totally undeserving of it for the most part. But the fact that they get it means they also do deserve it by the movie's logic. And it's, has all the problems that bear within that. And let's talk about Jeff and Pam for who they really are in a way that I haven't quite articulated. This gets back to why I fucking hate that movie so much, because maybe I should have made this clear maybe then. They are also white middle-class people, and therefore whose aesthetic seems more deliberately designed to leverage vile kind of sympathy rather than an alternatively subversive and transgressive move to counter the American hegemony with a more distinctly working class kind of folk couple, if you will. Like, that's kind of the thing, is like, oh, he's a software engineer. I mean, yes, the fact that software engineers and people who work white collar middle of the road jobs are just as disposable, and you go back to Office Space and all these things, I think that's very important. I think more and more people need to recognize their class solidarity within those groups. That, like, unless you are a fucking actual capitalist or billionaire, you should not see yourself as allied with that group. You need to identify in solidarity with all the working class and the wide range of diversity. But you also, A, shouldn't be confused about where you're still placed in the ultimate hierarchy. And B, more importantly, you should be very aware when media makes the decision, like Home Sweet Home Alone does, to put those people in front of your face as opposed to other types of people who are clearly more coded as working class or working poor, right? Be they white or any other race. And I think that's really significant that the choice is made there, because it simultaneously leverages your sort of liberal tinged non-sympathy because you're like, oh, well, they're white and whatever, but also your sort of liberal tinged identification of like, well, they are kind of like me because, I'm kind of a middle-class guy, I guess. I'm not a billionaire yet, but I will be, next week. Next week, I'm going to be a billionaire after my Bitcoin comes in, that type of shit. So Home Sweet Home Alone is cosplaying as something it's not. Whereas OG Home Alone is definitely what it is, all the complexities and problematicness of that laid bare. In this sense, OG Home Alone holds up as both a product of its time and something far more relevant today than ever, whereas Home Sweet Home Alone is an insult to that entire fucking notion. So there you have it, but I'm not quite done yet. We have to kind of end on the high, if you will. So first thing I'm going to do is give a little actual appendix here, which is just a kind of rundown of the McCalister children, right? So first we have to start with Peter, Mr. and Kate, Mrs. children, Kevin's parents, right? So you have Buzz, the first sociopath, Megan, who's the brunette daughter, right? She's the Megan the smug. So we have Buzz, the first sociopath, Megan the smug. Then we have Linny, the blonde one, Linny, the dancer of the grave. Then we have, she has her les incompetence line. Then we have Jeff, the ginger kid, aka Jeff the rude. Well, I've been giving them all these titles should be pretty obvious if you know who I'm talking about. Then we have Rob and Georgette McCalister, the family, the brother Peter that lives in France and his wife, right? And they have 2-3 other younger kids, but the kid we actually meet at the start of the film in Chicago is Heather McCalister, aka Heather the hot chick. And I mean that more than just she's hot. She just is that archetype, right? Through and through, right? Just like, Last, of course, we have Frank and Leslie, Uncle Frank and Aunt Leslie, McCalister's children. So we start off the oldest, the daughter, Tracy, the frizzy. Then we have Rod, the sociopath, aka Buzz's lackey. Then we have Sandra, the 10,000-mile stare of death, Sandra. Then we have Brooke, the innocent with her little glasses and pink overalls. And the youngest, of course, is Fuller, the wetter of beds. Now, the fact that Kieran Culkin, who plays Fuller, is now best known for playing Roman Roy on Succession, the sociopathic shitposter and chronic masturbator, should tell you everything you need to know about where Fuller, or Kevin for that matter, is today within their fictional universe. Really, sincerely. I think I also just want to kind of go through some favorite Home Alone 1 and 2 scenes and memories, etc. Just again, and on the high here. Buzz, I'm going all through all your private stuff. Better come out and pound me. So one of the weirdest lines with the pound me stuff. But it's so funny. And I have a friend who made a little kind of funny, goofy little song of oh, go through all your private stuff. Better come out and pound me, Buzz. Go through all your private stuff. Better come out and pound me, Buzz. Just funny. I love the inciting incident of the film. Just the whole first 15 minutes, that chaos of the family running through the house for that first night. And then the next morning, of course, just all that. I've never seen that type of chaos of family captured that well on film. Some people pointed out that's a John Hughes specialty of a kind that Chris Columbus just directed quite well. It's a good point to just shout out Chris Columbus's direction in the film is actually pretty good, especially for a studio family film, and worthy of the box office and worthy of the iconicness, I think. Speaking of, one of the most iconic moments is the aftershave moment with the fucking MaCaulay Culkin hands over face, mouth agape meme. There you go. Very random, but you might notice that, and I actually only noticed this literally for the first time last night when I watched the film, but when Mr. and Mrs. McCalister are first trying to get back to Kevin and they're still at the airport in France and they're trying to figure out a flight, the person playing the airline representative they're talking to is Hope Davis, the Hope Davis as a younger woman, and doing a French accent, which is probably why I didn't notice before, because it just my head, I was just oh, it's a French actor. No, it's Hope Davis just doing a French accent. And you can, once you realize that, you can clearly hear kind of distinctive voice and tone. I mentioned the just amazing, never-ending genius of Joe Pesci being in this film. And I don't think any more part is more Pesci and more quintessentially than this part right here, which is maybe my favorite line or moment in the whole movie. When Marv is telling Harry about his wet bandit stuff and like leaving the calling card and stuff. It's like, it's our calling card. Like Harry just looks at Marv and he's like, "You're sick. You're really sick. You know that?" And it's like the full blown, just like you feel like Nicky Santoro, like, or fucking Tommy right there in that moment, or just Pesci's general milieu, just right there in that moment. And it's funny because obviously Home Alone comes out in 1990, just, right after Goodfellas, or was it right before? Either way, same year. And of course, we have our "keep the change, you filthy animal." Don't worry, we're going to talk about Angels with Filthy Souls in a moment, but we get that whole thing with the pizza delivery scene, all that. The sheer beauty of the white Christmas in the morning for the ending sequence is just, wow. Seeing that house, that brings up some strong memories of my neighborhood at Snowfall, Interesting, just moving on to some key Home Alone 2 moments that I just would be remiss if we didn't talk about is you get Donald Trump in the Plaza Hotel, no less. And it's pretty fucking funny. Just seeing that. And it's just in line. The thing you got to understand about this is that it's in line with the Donald Trump existence at the time, which is as kind of like the type of celebrity that would just appear in random stuff. And he appeared in a lot of like media, even media for kids in the early 90s and whatnot, because it's just like part of America's general fetish for the rich. I mean, that's what ultimately allowed him to become president, right? This fetishization of being rich. If you're rich, you must be good. The richer you are, the gooder you are. The poorer you are, the badder you are, right? That's the basic ethos here. So likewise, someone being really poor to the point of being homeless must be a scary mutant person, which is how you get the pigeon lady. Now, of course, the ultimate message with the pigeon lady is one of, but we should be sympathetic and we shouldn't be so quick to judge, right? So it's like this whole thing that's like the poor need our generosity, but they're still mostly too weird or gross and come second to the desire to enact violence on those of them that are not as docile as the pigeon lady. Right, which is how you ultimately get back to Home Alone 2 being a torture fest on Harry and Marv, right? The course correction to even this within the course correction is that unlike Home Alone 1, where Kevin is just defending his property, in Home Alone 2, he's defending the toys for the less fortunate, which is, again, another weird tie into the Home Sweet Home Alone thing. Is the toys for the less fortunate, the stuff that they're giving away from the toy store for this whatever charity. And honestly, my only note about this is, does Kevin really care? I don't think he really fucking cares. And like, it's like, come on, like as if he needs the excuse to go through his battery with his favorite torture victim again. Like, come on. Another classic Home Alone 2 moment, probably the one, my favorite moment in the whole film, is the close extended use of the tape recorder with the perverts, Frank line, the way he sets that up perfectly to play this con on Rob Schneider and Tim Curry's, Plaza Hotel guy characters, and like the shouting at them and like, it's like, "You pervert," all that stuff. And then using Angels with Filthier slows, you were smooching everybody, all that stuff. So what's interesting to me, and again, this ties back into my earliest memories of Home Alone in the zeitgeist, was I would grow up and I'd see all these commercials for that tape recorder where they would show Kevin MaCaulay Culkin with the tape recorder. Like, you got to get this tape recorder thing. It's the coolest thing ever because you can like distort the voice and play it back. And it had a little stick out microphone. It's like a electronic toy thing, which was all the rage when I was a kid. So yeah, I just remember the mass market tie-in product, desperately wanted one, begged my parents, and I never got it. Right. And that's the Christmas cycle right there, because you're told Santa Claus. So you think, oh, the reason I wasn't rewarded with this gift I want is because I must be morally bad. Really good fucking lesson to teach children, isn't it? So an analysis and a breakdown is now in order for Angels with Filthy Souls and the sequel, Angels with Filthier Souls. And this is kind of what's going to take us to our conclusion here, because I think more than anything else I've said, all the subtext you need to know is in Kevin's obsession with Angels with Filthy Souls, and what Angels with Filthy Souls is, which, if you did not know, is a created film within the film. It's not a real movie, not a real sequel. This was shot and created for Home Alone and Home Alone 2, right? And you know, they were both, in the case of the first film, it was shot in one day in a gymnasium set turned soundstage, like a lot of scenes were, but just interesting because they had to build all these sets for this little thing, or one set, but a very detailed set to make it play out like this noir film. That's what it's trying to like basically, play at. And I think it's interesting because it, it being taking this noir element, of course, and, you could say it's like 90 seconds of something, but it misses obviously and removes a lot of the sort of called class elements that would make it meaningful, at least in an obvious way. And I should clarify, I say noir, and that's what a lot of people would tell you, but it's really more of a take on the early talky pre-code gangster cinema, films like the original Scarface or The Public Enemy. And if you view that tradition, it's like, yeah, they do demonize the poor, the immigrant, the non-mainstream variations of the capitalist American dream, i.e. organized crime. But also at the same time, and as most people do, glamorize its violence and its greed. And as what the censors would ultimately become concerned with was like exactly that. It's glamorizing this violence and greed and glamorizing these people. Because I think, maybe to some extent, you think of the role Howard Hughes as a producer played in the creation of the original Scarface, right? And Howard Hughes being this uber capitalist and Scarface being based on Capone, right? It's like this, and Howard Hughes, I should say, his Red Scare Mania has already been previously discussed, but, where do they fall in line? I think this is the interesting question with gangster cinema in general all the way through today is like, they're definitely at this point more made for the glamorization, rightly or wrongly, but there's always that element to which maybe at the initial impetus, it was like, hey, we got to make these movies so to warn people about how vile and despicable these people really are. And it's like, well, actually everyone just wants to be James Cagney, right? So there's that. And it's kind of like this sort of never-ending sort of cycle of like the drug movie and even all the way into like Miami Vice stuff or Michael Mann stuff, right? I mean, and further the connection with the genre stuff, with the pre-code gangster stuff is that, and speaking of James Cagney, is that the film is the Angels with Filthy Souls as a title is a play on Angels with Dirty Faces, which is a Cagney film from the period. Cagney was also, of course, the star of Public Enemy. In this case, Angels with Filthy Souls, in this case, stars Ralph Foodie, who plays Johnny. Now, the actor Michael Guido was originally cast in the role. He's still in it, playing the opposite part, the victim of Foodie Snakes, right? So Guido was originally cast because he did like a very good James Cagney impersonation, which is what they were looking for. And they ended up only switching it because Foodie comes on the set that day to play Snakes, and he had a knee injury, so he couldn't really do the stunt of like getting shot up the same way they needed it to be done. So they ended up switching roles, which I think was worked out for the best because Foodie as this bitter looking, like, Eastwood-esque old man kind of thing really, really works well to play like this just vile masculine energy, which brings us back to the point of what's really interesting about not only Kevin's obsession with Angels with Filthy Souls, but certainly the escalation of it in Angels with Filthier Souls in Home Alone 2, which Home Alone 2, one thing I'll say about it, because obviously we're mainly focused on Home Alone 1, but Home Alone 2 really furthers the thesis I'm trying to present forward as Kevin as this demented pervert, an anti-hero and one we root for, but certainly a demented pervert and a future potential serial killer, sadist, all the above, is because Angels with Filthier Souls, and it's startling to watch, really, even as a film made in 1992 that was supposed to be a film from the 30s, right, is basically just rampant misogyny. Johnny, the character played by Ralph Foodie, is just revealed to be a rampant misogynist who takes immense glee and pleasure Tommy gun mowing down this woman. And it's because she was smooching everybody, baby. You were out there smooching him and smooching everybody. He's like, Johnny, I would never. It's like, I believe you, but my Tommy gun don't. Bam, that's what you get. I want to say the B word here, but given the context, I won't. Like, fucking take that. Like, well, no, fuck it. Fucking take that, you bitch, you whore. Like, fuck you. Like, you fucking cheat on me. I'm fucking blasting you away. I mean, talk about getting into the dark heart of things, and in a fucking kids movie. And Kevin eats that shit up. So really, what are we talking about here? Like, the reality is Johnny is Kevin's most obvious and quite literal role model. Johnny is representative for what future Kevin might be like. You know, people that say it was Mr. Marley, Kevin for the future, despite the whole weird device of it being a movie within the movie in the past. I mean, Johnny to me is Kevin in the future. It's like, this is what future Kevin might actually be like: a trigger happy murderer who hates everybody, including all women, because they remind him of the mother who rejected his lusts. Because that's what I'm getting at. Is like the Kevin frustration of little Kevin is cannot be untied from his Oedipus complex if we're going along with that idea. So therefore, hey man, it's like, fuck these women. And it's yeah, I don't want to belabor the point and act like I'm indulging in the same sort of thing I'm criticizing, or at least characterizing here. Or, you know, maybe Home Alone is just about family forgiveness and a mother's love, genuinely, right? But then, like, if that's the case, then why everything else? Well, there you have it. Home Alone, timeless classic, masterpiece, cultural bedrock, and perhaps the most subversive indictment of American capitalism this side of There Will Be Blood. I rest my fucking case.
I mean, we go from this most recent annotation, which I would skip altogether if I were you guys. Not worth it. However, obviously Home Alone is an American staple of the holidays. It's a coming of age film every kid has to watch around Christmas time, or you're not really an American yet, are you?
We'll leave it there, and we'll be back with our top 5 Christmas movies where we'll get to talk about all this again.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. And a Happy New Year.
You get some women, take them to the Peachtree Dams. I say get liquored up and take them to the Peachtree Dams.
Do you know what I mean? You know why? It's a scary thing to give to a guy like me. Do you know what I mean?
I say get liquored up and take them to the Peachtree Dams.
Do you know what I mean?
I say get liquored up and take them to the Peachtree Dams. Get liquored up and take him to the Peachtree Dams.
Do you know what I mean? You know why? Final cut. It's a scary thing to give to a guy like me.